Chapter 808. Han Xiao released the 2 missions, and the interface of all the army players immediately changed. They all looked at it, and their expressions changed. Bringing new players to do missions will give us additional faction contribution points. This seems quite worth it. Completing any mission in the army is fine. Does running errands count? Definitely. Even the dungeon crystals dropped by the army count. These 2 missions can be repeated. This is a huge profit. We have to team up with players who have been in the faction for less than a year. Only new players born on planet Deirdre in version 3.0. It's the same for those from the Constellation Corridor. Didn't they just join the army? The 2 faction missions were packaged into a faction activity, which created a wave among the players. The mission that Han Xiao issued was not forcing the players, but enticing them. It was such a rare opportunity to farm contribution points. So many players would not reject it. They were just teaming up with a new player, so they would not lose anything. Perhaps some players would not be moved, but more players were willing to grab this opportunity. As long as the majority of the players did not limit themselves to their own small circle and took the initiative to team up with new players, his goal would be achieved. When new and old players played together, they would be able to build some relationships. At the very least, it was normal for them to add each other as friends. The 2 missions were set and targeted different groups. Instructing the new players would make the old players willing to team up with the new players, and consulting the veterans would make the new players take the initiative to find the old players. Those who belonged to the category of new players were not limited to the players from the Constellation Corridor. The new players that Han Xiao had recruited from planet Deirdre in version 3.0 were also new players. The old players of the Shattered Star Ring naturally prefer to play with their own people. Consulting the veterans was to let the foreign players take the initiative to find the old players of the army, not only the Shattered Star Ring players. Compared to these old players who had been in the army for 1 or 2 versions, these new players needed contribution points more and were more enthusiastic about this mission. Under Han Xiao's guidance, the situation in the army headquarters changed very quickly. The various areas where the players gathered became lively, and groups of people started to ask for teams. We're missing 1 person. We're all veteran players of the army. We need a newbie above level 100. Don't be a pugilist. Let's do the new veteran missions together to farm contribution points. Level 88 Cannon Master. Equipped with lethal firepower and bullet shower. His main damage output skills are all level 4 and above. His main weapons are the O-38 Arc Light Cannon and the Snakebone Electromagnetic Submachine Gun. Equipped with the 8th Generation Black Serpent Armor, all purple equipment in the army. Newbies looking for veterans to form a party to farm contribution points. 30-man team preparing to enter the defense battle dungeon of the secret battle conch. There are 4 empty spots now. A few high-level players from the Constellation Corridor, at least grade C+. We need tanks and crowd control. Don't deal damage. X-over, don't deal damage. Hurry up and get us moving. The communication between the players suddenly became lively. The Constellation Corridor players eagerly sought out the old players of the army to form a team, and the old players did not reject any of them. The situation immediately improved. The foreign players entered the teams of different army players one after another, quickly blending into the environment and doing missions together. Because the players were all waiting for the Flickering World main storyline, they were mainly farming dungeons, which indirectly increased the sales of dungeon crystals. The players did not have any doubts about these 2 missions. It just so happened that a group of newbies had come from across the starfield. To the players, it was very normal for the army to let the veterans teach the newbies. Hey, Chinese brothers, do you know when this event will end? Who cares? We'll just farm it. You guys don't seem to find it strange at all. In our starfield, there are very few group activities like this. Our army's faction activities are very frequent. I participated in many large-scale missions with hundreds of thousands of players working together. You'll get used to it after some time. This is the specialty of our Shattered Star Ring. The normal players started to form teams, and the club guilds also formed teams. The 4 large guilds were overjoyed. They had just reached an agreement with the foreign guilds, and this mission immediately popped up. The Russian and Australian guilds were all newbies. Those guild representatives had just left, and they were already running back to ask them for help. Even their factions were helping them. After monitoring for a while, Han Xiao nodded and was quite satisfied with the impact he had caused. He had broken up the trust accounts of the countless players who often played together in the two-star fields, allowing the normal players to take the initiative to accept the newbies and gradually integrate into each other's groups. This was a good start. If there were no activities to guide them, the worst-case scenario in the future would be that the Chinese, Russian, and Australian players would slowly stabilize. Of course, the probability of such an extreme possibility was very low. If the players were allowed to develop naturally, the various groups would not communicate too frequently, and the factions would still be obvious, which was not conducive to the harmony of the army players. With him leading the way, the efficiency of communication between the players on both sides would be greatly increased, which was very beneficial to the faction. He planned to let these two missions continue for some time. Soon, he would be exploring the flickering world, and there would be countless missions. It was a good time for the players on both sides to act together. Closing the forums, Han Xiao left the office and returned to his bedroom. His bedroom in the army was very simple, with silver alloy walls and a transparent skylight on the ceiling that allowed him to look straight at the vast universe. In the middle of the room was a large black bed and simple living equipment such as mechanical suit display cabinets, bookshelves, fridges, automatic cookers, biological waste disposal boxes, and so on were placed along the walls. Only a pot of green plants was placed in the corner, adding a touch of life to the cold room. He had planted them himself. Taking off his coat, Han Xiao took a shower and came out wrapped in a loose towel. His slender body was covered in water droplets and hot steam. He took out more than 10 tubes of special nutrition paste with different flavors from the fridge, casually opened them, and gulped them down. This thing recovered stamina extremely quickly, and it was not cheap either. Beyond grade, as could basically not eat or sleep, replenishing themselves by absorbing all kinds of energy. However, he still retained his habits as a human. The increase in strength and the change in his race would also change the way he viewed the world. He did not need to rest, just to remind himself that his humanity still existed. Because of the amazing control that Beyond Grade has had over their bodies, Han Xiao could no longer fall asleep naturally and could only control his brain to enter a dormant state. After going to the Central Galaxy for 2 months, he finally fell asleep in his own home. Lying on the bed, before falling asleep, Han Xiao's consciousness entered the quantum network and greeted Philip. "I'm going to sleep. Call me if you need anything. Good night." "Master, good night, Philip said. After resting for a night, Han Xiao opened his eyes on time, got out of bed, washed up, took off his robe, and put on a black coat, returning to his image as Black Star. The first thing he did was to open the forums. Because of the cross team, more and more new players were active in the Shattered Star Ring and communicating with the Chinese players. With a glance, Han Xiao noticed that there was a new post on the forum. It was the latest episode of the popular Galaxy Times program. It'll mention the matter of crossing star fields. Han Xiaoxin opened the show. After watching the familiar opening, the two hosts shared the events and interesting stories of the various star fields. Very soon, they mentioned the first batch of players who crossed star fields. Not long ago, the famous NPC faction of the Shattered Star Ring, the Black Star Corps, provided the Constellation Corridor players with a channel to the Shattered Star Ring. According to statistics, a total of 713,000 players left with the Black Star Corps, completing the first known crossing of star fields. In version 2.0, the Black Star Corps was the guiding faction for the players of the Shattered Star Ring. Now, they're guiding the players of another star field to cross star fields. Maybe this is a signal. In the next version, the players will be able to cross star fields on a large scale and freely go to different areas. We have data to prove that the evolution of the players' areas of activity is like this. Version 1.0, Novice Planets. Version 2.0, Entering the Galaxy. Version 3.0, Exploring the Star Cluster. In every version, the player's area of activity will expand. Originally, We thought that the players would mainly explore the star field they were born in, but the actions of the Black Star Core gave us a new idea. Because of the theme of the galaxy, the players of the various star fields will interact sooner or later. Therefore, according to this trend, we can infer that the next version will be the stage where the players can freely cross star fields. After watching the show, Han Xiao smiled. This speculation was logical, but the Galaxy Times was only half right. In the next version, the players would indeed be able to cross star fields on a large scale. However, unlike what the Galaxy Times had guessed, the players would not be able to freely go to different areas but gather in the flickering world. The Galaxy Times had misled the players. Other than Han Xiao, no one knew that the flickering world would be the main stage of the next version. Han Xiao smiled to himself. The players who followed me to the flickering world now have no idea how much of an advantage they are getting. After browsing through the forums, Han Xiao finally got down to business. He patrolled around the army headquarters before heading to the logistics department. Walking into Reynolds' office, he immediately saw Nero, who was buried in a mountain of books. Godfather. Nero raised his head, and his dark eyes could be clearly seen. Realizing that it was Han Xiao, his tired face bloomed with joy. He threw away the book in his hands and ran into Han Xiao's arms. Looking at the terrifying amount of homework that Reynolds had given him, Han Xiao's mouth twitched. This is already at the level of child abuse, right? Criticizing Reynolds in his mind, Han Xiao patted Nero's head and said, "Let's go. I'll take you on a trip." Really? Nero was so surprised that he almost cried out. When he left Star regretful, Nero thought that he was going out to play with his godfather. Who would have thought that there would be endless homework in the universe? With Reynolds' personality, what he was best at was force-feeding. For the past 2 months, Nero felt as though he had been in hell. Now that he saw Han Xiao, it was as though he had seen an angel who had descended to save him. He could finally escape from this sea of suffering. "Didn't I promise you?" Han Xiao smiled. Actually, he was not completely bringing Nero on a trip. The main purpose was to go to the Tyla civilization, where Hereful was, and find the wormhole location data that ES God's doppelganger had passed through. Other than Nero, Han Xiao only brought Han, Aurora, and Fu Ding. They set off in the blacklight stealth, which was extremely fast. It would not take too long for them to go back and forth, so it would not delay the operation in the flickering world. Because Hereful had been killed by ES God's subordinates long ago, the chances of finding the wormhole data were very slim. Therefore, Han Xiao purposely brought Fyodor and Nero along to make up for his bad luck. After all, the people who believed in metaphysics the most were still the Africans. The blacklight stealth passed through the Stargate without any stops along the way. In just a few days, Han Xiao and the others arrived at one of the Tyla civilization's ruling planets and visited the advanced machinery school where Hereful had once worked. With Han Xiao's identity, as long as it did not have any ill intentions, all the civilizations in the Shattered Star Ring welcomed Han Xiao as a guest. Heir, except for the Clink Kingdom that cursed him every day and the Star Pupil God race that stabbed him in the dark. This machinery school had an official nature and had nurtured many mechanic talents for the Tyla civilization. The school was extremely large and majestic. The dean had long been waiting at the entrance of the school with people. Han Xiao and the others were welcomed as soon as they arrived. "Your Excellency Black Star, it's our honor to have you here." The dean was full of smiles. "You're too polite." Han Xiao nodded. "Please follow me." The dean waved his hand and summoned mechanical boards. These were all public transportation devices in the school. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. Han Xiao stepped on the skateboard and followed the dean to the guest room. They chatted and laughed along the way. As the group passed through the school, Han Xiao did not expect to attract a crowd. Some students seemed to have recognized him, and the news spread. Groups of students followed behind them on their skateboards and watched from afar. Han Xiao looked back and said with surprise, "Those are the students of the school, right? Why are they following behind us?" "Your Excellency Black Star, as you know, this is the machinery school. All the students are mechanic supers," the dean said helplessly. "So, ahem, you don't seem to be very clear about your position in the hearts of the mechanic students." Han Xiao immediately understood. He looked back and saw that the students following behind them had excitement, surprise, and worship on their faces. They looked at him with respect, as if they were on a pilgrimage. He was the only beyond grade A mechanic in the Shattered Star Ring. His position in the eyes of the mechanic supers was even more special. He was equivalent to the authority of the mechanic class in the Shattered Star Ring. His visit to this machinery school caused a commotion among the students. The dean smiled and said, "Your Excellency Blackstar, why don't we organize and let you set up a nest here to impart your knowledge on the path of machinery? What do you think?" Han Xiao thought about it and did not reject. He waved his hands and said, "Let's see how it goes. If this trip is successful, it's not impossible. What's the purpose of your visit this time?" The dean's eyes flashed. Han Xiao had only applied for a visit and had not said his purpose. "Hariful is my friend. I'm here to find a set of data he left behind." The dean was stunned for a moment before feeling a little sad. He sighed. The school was attacked not long ago. He was kidnapped and killed by a group of people. He was a good researcher. It's a pity that we lost a talent. The murderer was ES God's subordinate. I've already avenged him. The dean felt sad for a while before suddenly asking, "Did ES God's subordinate kidnap him for the data you mentioned?" This was not difficult to deduce, so Han Xiao was not surprised. He looked at him and nodded. "That's right. When Hariful was researching in the Terralam wormhole group, I visited him a few times. One of them was ambushed by the Dark Star leader, and I was forced to fight with the ES God doppelganger. However, I could not beat him back then, and it was all thanks to Hariful's help that the ES God doppelganger was exiled in a wormhole. The location data from that wormhole is what I want." The wormhole group in the Terralam star cluster was the center of the Shattered Star Ring. The teleportation location of every unstable wormhole was random, unlike stargates that had fixed coordinates. The probability of a wormhole repeating itself was close to zero, so it was useless even if the wormhole was found. Only the location data recorded by the teleportation device was valuable. When Hariful was kidnapped, all the wormhole detectors in his laboratory were taken away. Not a single one was left. You should have recorded the data into the internal database of your school. I hope you can lend me the authority to check. The internal database of the experiment is top secret. I can only allow outsiders to access it with the permission of the upper echelons of the civilization. Furthermore, I'm not sure if Hariful has a backup of that data. Also, he detected too much wormhole data. If you don't remember the date and time, we won't know which set of data you want. Then, please help me report this to the upper echelons of the Terra civilization, Han Xiao said with a deep voice. Such an internal database, with an official background, would definitely have extremely strong virtual defense measures. Under the circumstances where there was hope of obtaining the data through official channels, he did not want to risk offending a star cluster civilization. Chapter 809. The group entered the academic affairs building in the center of the school. The mechanics students that followed them were not allowed to enter as they pleased. After pacing outside for a while, they slowly dispersed. The few of them came to the dean's guest room, and the dean got a mechanical assistant to serve drinks to the guests. After inviting Han Xiao and the rest to sit down, he said, "Your Excellency Blackstar, please wait for a moment. I will report your application to the upper echelons." Han Xiao nodded and watched as the dean left. Everyone waited in the room. Nero leaned against the window and curiously looked at the scenery of the academy. There were small, floating islands floating in the sky, and there were rows upon rows of metal buildings on the ground. The outer walls were painted in yellow and blue colors, and students were riding on mechanical skateboards as they shuttled between the buildings. The red, yellow, and green forest that was planted in the academy swayed under the airwaves of the thrusters like waves in the forest. The alloy buildings and artificial greenery coexisted in harmony, forming a harmonious hue that gave off a sense of beauty that was both mechanical and natural. This place is so different from the Blue Star. It's so beautiful. Nero felt that everything was new. This is nothing. The Imperial College on the mother planet of the Red Empire is many times more spectacular than this. Han Xiao laughed out loud. Bringing Nero out on a trip was not only to take advantage of his luck, but also to broaden his horizons. Really? I want to take a look as well. Nero was filled with interest. I will bring you there in the future. Han Xiao waved his hand and called Nero back. He pointed at the drinks on the table and said, "Come and have a taste. This is good stuff." There were a few cups of hot white liquid on the table, exuding a rich milky aroma. It was some kind of milk product specially provided by the Tyla civilization. As the liquid swayed, it shone with a faint golden light, as if the sun was shining on a milk river at dusk. Nero took a sip, and his eyes widened. He then raised his head and gulped down a large mouthful before letting out a sigh of relief. He licked the white stains on his lips with a look of unsatisfied. "Is it good? If it's good milk." "Godfather, what is this? I've never drunk such delicious milk before." Han Xiao explained with a smile. When the Tyla civilization was exploring a certain colonial planet, they discovered an interstellar creature that was on the brink of extinction in the universe. It was called the Helleboreal beast, commonly known as the Nebula Behemoth. Its body was extremely huge, covering the sky and the sun. It could travel through the stars with its physical body. Some people even called it the giant godmouth. The Nebula beast's reproductive ability is extremely low. It will only mate every 100 years or so. After giving birth to a cub, it will enter a 3-month lactation period. After 3 months, the cub will be weaned. It is only during the lactation period that the Nebula beast will produce milk. It is rare and precious, has a unique flavor, and is very nourishing. What you're drinking is their milk. So that's the case. Nero rubbed his stomach. No wonder my body feels so warm after drinking it. Do you still want a drink? Drink mine. Han Xiao smiled. Nero licked his lips. He was a little craving for it, but after some internal struggle, he shook his head. You can't let me finish such a precious thing. Godfather should drink it too. Hearing this, the few of them laughed. I won't drink it. Han Xiao waved his hand. Luxuries that were extremely precious to ordinary galactic residents were nothing in his eyes. He would always have them if he wanted them. However, he was not interested in luxurious consumables. With this extra money, he might as well buy a few more portions of special nutrition paste. This was what he liked. It was convenient to eat, and his stamina recovered quickly. It was extremely cost-effective. After chatting for a while, the director still had not returned. Han Xiao turned around and looked at the mechanical assistant leaning against the wall. How may I be of service? The mechanical assistant sensed his gaze and immediately responded. Han Xiao waved his hand and observed the mechanical assistant's bionic skin. Needless to say, this director looked like he was in his 70s or 80s. The bionic skin that he gave the mechanical assistant was extremely attractive. It probably really had all the functions of a secretary. After waiting for a while, the director pushed the door open and entered. He had finally returned. Apologies for making everyone wait, Your Excellency Black Star. The higher-ups have agreed to your request and allowed me to use my authority to help you search for the data. Okay, thank the upper echelons of the Tyla civilization for me. Han Xiao heaved a sigh of relief. Things were much easier now that he could solve the problem with his face. He could not help but think of the time when the star system civilizations did not give him face, and he had to ask for help. Now, the beyond grade A face fruit was much more powerful, and even the star cluster civilizations were willing to give him face. The director pressed a few buttons on the table, and the color of the table changed. It immediately turned into the operation screen of the internal database. He looked up and asked, Your Excellency Black Star, do you still remember the time and location of the data? Han Xiao nodded and explained. The director immediately entered the relevant parameters and ran the search system to find the relevant data. Although he had agreed to help, he naturally would not let a beyond grade A mechanic operate the internal database so easily. The director still did it for him. Countless items appeared on the screen. After scrolling for a while, there was only one item left on the screen, which completely matched the search parameters. The director exhaled and said, Found it. It seems like Herifel uploaded the files in the past. The time and location are correct. See if it's the data you want. Han Xiao came over and looked through it carefully. Although he did not specialize in wormholes like Hereful, he had the relevant professional knowledge and could understand the coordinates. However, this set of coordinates was not in the star map of the explored universe, and the parameters were very complicated. Without referring to the star map, he could not see anything from the data. He would only know where it led after some research. Yes, God is so concerned about this set of data. I wonder where his doppelganger was thrown aback then. Han Xiaoxin thought. After confirming that this set of data was the time when Hereful banished God, Han Xiao blinked his eyes, instantly took a few hundred photos, and sent them to Philip's database. He then nodded to the director. Looks like my luck is not bad. I've already made a backup. Thank you very much this time. The director turned off the screen and let it return to the desktop. He smiled and said, as long as you're satisfied. I have something to ask of you. Han Xiao was not surprised at all. The Tyla civilization naturally planned to trade something from him and would not help for free. If it's within my ability, I will help. Sai, you misunderstood. We just want to hire you as an honorary professor of the official Tyla Mechanical College in the name of the school. It's that simple? Han Xiao was a little surprised. He thought about it and immediately understood. As the only beyond grade A mechanic in the Shattered Star Ring, if he became a professor of the official Tyla Mechanical College, this college would become famous and the recruitment attraction would skyrocket. Many mechanic students would apply for the college based on his name, providing more talents for the Tyla civilization. Furthermore, if he became a professor of an official college, it would also represent a certain stance. The Tyla civilization would definitely not lose out. The other party had just helped him, so Han Xiao would not reject such a small request. He nodded and said, I agree. The director's face lit up. Then I'll get someone to deal with it immediately. By the way, you're an honorary professor of the school. I hope you can hold a lecture here tomorrow or the day after. It won't take up too much of your time. If you don't have any objections, I'll get someone to publicize it in the school. Okay, then I'll disturb you guys for a few more days. As soon as he said that, Han Xiao thought about it and suddenly said, by the way, since I've become a professor of the school, can you give me a copy of the basic and advanced courses of your school? The courses of this official college were carefully written, and the basic teaching materials were very useful to the faction. They could be used to systematically cultivate the mechanic class supers of the army. Although some high-grade supers were strong individually, they were not necessarily good at teaching. For example, Ray force-feeding Nader was one of them. The current mechanic course of the army could basically be summarized as from beginner to grave, from advancement to coffin. The players did not care, but the ordinary recruits were much more miserable. Since he had become an honorary professor of the school, Han Xiao might as well take some benefits. The next day, the Tyla civilization announced that they had successfully hired Black Star as an honorary professor of the official mechanic school and contacted a bunch of galactic media outlets to spread this news. Currently, many civilizations in the Shattered Star Ring were business allies of the Black Star Corps, and becoming an honorary professor of the official mechanic school was even more important than business. The first to receive the news were the few star cluster civilizations in the Shattered Star Ring. They were all shocked and surprised. Why would Black Star suddenly be on the same side as the Tyla civilization? The Amethyst civilization was even more shocked. Forget about sleeping with the thief of the Red Empire. We can't afford to offend them, but you're actually flirting with that shameless neighbor of ours. Do you still have me in your eyes, your first ally who invested the most in your alliance? After being bombarded by Ralph's phone calls, Han Xiao finally managed to calm the other party down. This news also caused a huge commotion in the official mechanic school of Tyla. Countless students were shocked. Black Star is our honorary professor, and he's going to give a lecture? How did that perverted dean convince Black Star? Countless students were moved. They felt extremely honored, and their faces were shining. Originally, the lecture was arranged to be held in the school building, but there were simply too many students who came to listen. In the end, the school decided to hold Han Zhao's lecture in the central square. On the day of the lecture, the venue was filled with people, and there were not enough seats. Countless students stood on mechanical skateboards in the air to listen to the lecture. More than 90% of the people in the school were there. Most of the teachers, instructors, and professors also came to listen. In front of a beyond grade A mechanic, there were also students. Han Xiao stood on a temporary platform in the middle of the square. He looked around and smiled bitterly in his heart. He had thought that he was only going to impart his experience to a small group of students. He did not expect the school to make such a big scene. Not only were there so many people watching, but there were also many recording devices on the side, recording his every move. It was like a concert or even a lecture. It was impossible for him to have stage fright. Back then, he did not even mind fighting with Heber in front of trillions of galactic residents. Giving a lecture now would not change his mentality at all. With his beyond grade A standard, any lecture would be enough to satisfy these students. However, Han Xiao felt that he was not used to such a scene. Currently, the one who focused on lecturing was that old man Austin. Cough, cough. Let's begin then. Han Xiao cleared his throat and began speaking. Black Star went to give a public lecture to the official school of a star cluster civilization. He's going to the flickering world soon, and he still has the time to do this? In the Bloodshed Land headquarters, Heber was confused and could not understand what was going on. This kid, is he trying to copy me and create an organization like the Machinery Hermit Order? In the Palace of Hidden Spells, Austin had a strange expression. TSK, I hate mechanics. On the star pupil mother planet of the Protoss race, Cisco turned off the screen without saying a word. He did not want to see Han Xiao at all. Every time he saw the evolution cube on Han Xiao's neck, his heart would ache. Yo, this guy is starting again? In the Red Empire Embassy, Zoel shook his head and laughed. The way he saw it, Han Xiao was not satisfied with the current situation and had gone to form an alliance with another star cluster civilization. He was happy to see this. As long as it did not affect his official business, Zoel could not wait for the dynasty's allies to have more influence in a star field. As for the players who were playing together in the Black Star Army headquarters, some of them discovered the broadcast in the Galactic Channel, and it spread like wildfire. Very soon, it spread among the players, and more players turned on their communicators to watch Han Xiao's lecture. That's weird. I thought the army commander had been staying in the headquarters. Who would have thought that after not seeing him for a few days, he would go to another civilization? What is he talking about? Why can't I understand him at all? Just as the players were watching curiously, all of a sudden, the mechanic players were all shocked. A notification appeared on their interface. You're listening to Black Star, LV, talking about the knowledge of the mechanic class. Because the gap is too large, an INT and LUK judgment has been made. Judgment has ended. You seem to understand it. One of your random mechanic class skills has received 50,000 EXP. You're listening to Black Star, LV, talking about the knowledge of the mechanic class. Because the gap is too large, an INT and LUK judgment has been made. Judgment has ended. You seem to be in deep thought. 2 of your random mechanic class skills have received 12,000 EXP. You're listening to Black Star, LV, talking about the knowledge of the mechanic class. Judgment has ended. You have an epiphany. 4 of your random mechanic class skills have received 350,000 EXP. All the mechanic players who were watching the broadcast were shocked. This is skill EXP? The mechanic class players were overjoyed. This was the kind of notification that NPCs would give when they taught skills or EXP to the players. However, it was very rare to encounter a random skill EXP increase. The mechanic players did not expect that they would trigger such a good thing when they came to watch the broadcast out of curiosity. Very soon, the news was exposed on the forums and spread to the ears of all the mechanic players like a hurricane. They were extremely surprised and started to watch the broadcast. Holy sh*T, my mechanic class skills have leveled up. This must be a random event. This is much faster than me doing missions. Holy sh*T, my intermediate machinery affinity is now level 9. I'm only 1 level away from max. As long as the army commander is awesome. Leveling up skills had always been a bottomless pit that consumed EXP. The mechanic players were practically celebrating. The players of the other 4 classes could only be envious and jealous. They could only watch as the mechanic players encountered random events and earned a lot of EXP. It had been a very long time since Han Xiao personally taught skills to the players. Because they did not interact much with him, many players had gradually forgotten about his past. However, this accident coincidentally made countless players suddenly remember his identity as a teacher. His image in the hearts of the players was instantly solidified. He was recognized as the top teacher of the mechanic class. Chapter 8:10. Your Excellency Black Star, you're welcome to visit the school anytime. At the dock of the spaceport, the dean brought some people to send Han Xiao off. The effect of the lecture in the morning was remarkable. Not only did the students of the school benefit, even the dean felt that he had benefited greatly. At this time, he sincerely wanted to get closer to Han Xiao. Let's keep in touch in the future. Han Xiao nodded and led the group into the blacklight stealth behind him. The spaceship started up and turned into a stream of light, shooting into the dark and vast universe along the spaceport. With the data in hand and the lecture that he had promised the dean, he did not stay any longer and left the Tyla civilization. As for the influence of his association with the Tyla civilization, he did not really care. The Tyla civilization was a neutral civilization in the Shattered Star Ring and was very powerful. They were rarely provoked by other organizations and did not take the initiative to provoke others either. The heat of the Black Star Corps' expansion had yet to disappear, so this bit of news would not cause much of a commotion. At most, it would make the star cluster civilizations of the same level react a little. However, the excited mechanic class players on the forums surprised him. After reading the post, he realized that the public lecture had triggered the random event of high-level NPCs imparting knowledge, which gave many mechanic class players unexpected benefits. There were many ways for players to gain experience, and this kind of passive experience imparting by high-level NPCs was one of them. It was just that it was relatively rare. Other than luck, the chances of it happening also depended on the difference between the NPCs and the players, as well as what the NPCs were talking about. Pugilists and mage-class players were not unfamiliar with this. Pugilists could eavesdrop in some dojos and secretly learn skills, but there was a risk and there was no guarantee that they would succeed. The main reason was to avoid farming contribution points. It was the same for mages. I didn't expect such a coincidence. It even solidified my image as a mechanic class teacher. Han Xiao shook his head helplessly. This was not a bad thing. His consciousness sank into the quantum network and poked Philip. How's the research on that set of data? It's too complicated, hum. I can't estimate the time needed to decipher it. The positioning data of the wormhole had been handed over to Philip for calculation and analysis. A large number of experiments and measurements were required, and no one knew how long it would take to produce results. However, Han Xiao was not in a hurry. Since the Tyla civilization knew that he and ES God had their eyes on this set of data, they would definitely feel that there was some secret to this set of data and would definitely organize professional scientists to study it in secret. The research speed of a star cluster civilization would naturally not be slower than him and ES God. He had a good relationship with the Tyla civilization because he wanted to borrow their strength. If the Tyla civilization managed to find some clues, he would also have the opportunity to enjoy the results. He was also preparing to send the data to the Empire and borrow the Empire's technological power to decipher the secrets of the data. With such a powerful ally, it would be a waste not to use it. The journey was peaceful, and the Blacklight stealth returned to the Army headquarters. After resting for a few days, the dynasty's official order was finally issued. The Black Star Corps, Bloodshed Land, Clint, and the other Shattered Star Ring allies were to immediately head to the flickering world through the dynasty's Stargate station at the edge of the starfield. After preparing for so long, the dynasty was finally going to officially start the first phase of development of the flickering world. Han Xiao immediately issued a mobilization order. When it was time to depart, Philip's broadcast announcement echoed throughout the entire Army headquarters. All Army members participating in the development of the flickering world, please board the spaceship immediately. We will depart in 30 minutes. I repeat, all. The players could not wait to leave. They entered the spaceport and stepped onto the transport spaceships. After the end of the Secret War, the flickering world had already become the next main storyline in the eyes of the players. Exploring an unfamiliar star field was the grandest main storyline event they had ever encountered. The millions of players were extremely excited. Furthermore, with the example of the Secret Combatant title, most of the Army players accepted the Flickering World main storyline mission. The number of people participating in the Flickering World main storyline mission was unprecedented. Among them, the players from the Constellation Corridor were even more excited. The players from the Shattered Star Ring had similar experiences in the past, but the number of times the Constellation Corridor players had participated in large-scale group missions could be counted on one hand. To be able to participate in such a large-scale faction activity the moment they arrived in the Shattered Star Ring, many of them felt as though they were country bumpkins entering the city. In the past, they had only heard of the benefits of the Black Star Corps. Now that they had personally experienced it, the evaluation of the Army in the hearts of the more than 700,000 players increased once again. The members of the Army headquarters quickly gathered and boarded the spaceships. Under Han Zhao's order, the fleet set off and began their long journey. A few months ago, Sylvia had already deployed all the teams. At this time, when the main fleet of the Army headquarters set off, the standby teams of the many Army bases in the Colton Star Cluster also set off, heading straight to their destination. According to the plan, the teams would slowly approach the main fleet midway and meet up with Han Zhao. The number of fleets and manpower that the Army had sent out this time was extremely large, taking away almost all the free troops. This was the largest operation in the history of the Army. Exploring a new star field, no matter how many people were sent, it would not be enough. The exploration team that was sent out this time would build a stronghold in the Flickering World and would not return for a very long time. Han Zhao was the same. Currently, the Black Star Corps had already gained a firm foothold in the Shattered Star Ring, and their headquarters, the Colton Star Cluster, was well guarded. Furthermore, with the support of the Dynasty and Purple Crystal, as well as the protection of the identity of the Shattered Star Ring Civilization Conference, there was basically nothing to worry about. The Flickering World was the center stage of the next version, and developing the Flickering World was the key to the next step of the Army's development. The Dynasty's allies in the Shattered Star Ring were the first organizations to explore, and Han Zhao had only obtained such an advantage after many operations. This opportunity could not be missed. Only by obtaining a greater advantage and building a firm foundation could they deal with the countless organizations that would fight for territory in the future. Somewhere in the Shattered Star Ring, floating Dragon Island, Dragon Emperor Palace. Is that so? Black Star has already set off. The communicator showed the message sent by Han Zhao. Ames retracted her gaze, glanced at the floating dragon officers on both sides of the Dragon Bone throne, and softly said, "Set off. Let's go to Aquamarine. Central Galaxy, Abyss of Stars, the mother planet of the Radiant Federation." Radiant's president Bader Al-Hassid put down the intelligence in his hands, looked around at the elders in the room, and slowly said, "The Red Star Corps is finally about to open the Flickering World. The Dynasty's main focus in the future will be placed on this. It is estimated that the exploration of the Flickering World will last for hundreds of years." The chief elder tapped his walking stick and said with a hoarse voice, "The Flickering World was first discovered by our detectors. Back then, when we traded the ownership of the Flickering World to the Red Empire, we exchanged a lot of benefits. They are developing a new star field, and it will take a very long time for them to earn back their investment. Back then, when they compromised with the Red Empire, it was to exchange benefits, avoid the Dynasty's sharpness, and quell the Crimson Tide." Bader said calmly, "In order to develop a new star field, the Dynasty will definitely invest a lot of manpower and resources. The Flickering World will become a quagmire that will hold the Dynasty back for the next few decades. The Dynasty will not be able to fight for things on other levels for a very long time. This is very beneficial to us." The chief elder stroked the light crystal at the top of his walking stick and said with a deep voice, The dynasty exchanged the ownership of the flickering world from us and made an agreement. During the early exploration process, only the Red Empire can build stargates. Other civilizations cannot build stargates to the flickering world without permission. Any organization that enters without permission will be treated as an enemy by the dynasty. However, the agreement is just a pile of words. There's no need for us to do anything, Bader said. Those ambitious supercluster civilizations that have always wanted to challenge our position are smart enough. They understand the standpoint of us and the arcane church, and they know that this is a great opportunity to profit. Not many will let go of the resources of a new star field. Although these chess pieces usually follow orders, as long as they see the extremely low risk and huge benefits, we don't need to do anything. They will act according to our wishes and become obedient. After pausing for a while, Bader continued, with so many eyes watching, the dynasty does not have the ability to monopolize the new star field. For political influence, trade, and other factors, the dynasty will probably open the flickering world to the entire universe after creating a complete star map. It might be due to pressure, or it might be on their own initiative to open the flickering world. This will allow them to obtain countless foreign labor and resources, thus recovering a large amount of the dynasty's direct military and manpower. The chief elder nodded. The dynasty has the ownership of the star field, but the greater the benefits, the greater the pressure they will face. Let the dynasty bear it. Only when one has something will there be a loss. We can take a step back in order to advance, and we will be able to obtain huge benefits. Bader crossed his arms and lowered his eyes. Since the dynasty is willing, let's increase the pressure on them. Central Galaxy, Constellation Corridor, Red Empire's mother planet. Dynasty ruler Unravel finished reading the intelligence of the Black Star Core and Bloodshed Land. She put down the documents in her hands and looked up. Everyone present was a top official of the dynasty. Your Excellency, ruler, our allies in the Shattered Star Ring were the first to explore. We will continue to invest more of the dynasty's direct troops and allies in the future. Although the Radiant Federation has compromised on the surface, they will definitely violate the agreement secretly. The Radiant Federation, the Arcane Church, and those supercluster civilizations will definitely take action secretly. I know. Uranril's tone was calm. Ever since we entered the galaxy calendar, the Radiant Federation has already lost its edge and is unwilling to bear the pressure. What right do they have to swallow the greatest benefits? I did not expect them to abide by the agreement from the beginning. In the next few decades, we might have a tougher time, but history will prove that those who give up on the future will be abandoned by the future. Everyone nodded silently. The people causing trouble in the dark will not expose their identities. With such an opportunity, we can intimidate those supercluster civilizations that are becoming more and more unruly. Urnrel's eyes narrowed as she said firmly, "Let them remember the dynasty's way of doing things." On the fallen ark, Harrison flicked his tongue and woke up God from his slumber. The arcane church has responded. God woke up, took a deep breath, and slowly said, "What did they say?" They said they do not know. That means they have agreed. God narrowed his eyes. Have the fleet turn around and head to the desolate universe belt near the arcane church. See where the temporary stargate they have prepared for me is. At the edge of the shattered star ring, at the border of the explored universe in the desolate darkness, an enormous stargate station stood in the universe, and the enormous black star core slowly approached. This was the Red Empire's dedicated stargate station to connect to the flickering world. Currently, this was the only way to go to the flickering world. A large number of Dynasty battleships were stationed at this station, and no one was allowed to sneak in. After reporting their identities, the Black Star Core fleet entered the Stargate in batches and disappeared into the blue space vortex. It's time to explore. Brothers, I'm a little excited. The players on the transport ships rubbed their palms in anticipation. The main ship was about to enter the Stargate. On the bridge, Hela, Fu Ding, Hardaway, and the other Black Star Guards officers subconsciously turned around and looked at the bright starry sky behind them. That was the direction of the shattered star ring. Seeing this, Han Shao also looked back, and his heart skipped a beat. This trip should take a long time before he returned. It seemed like he would have to spend the 10-month EXP penalty in the flickering world. When he returned to the explored universe, his level should be much higher than his current level of 240. The evolution cube might not be the only universal treasure in his hands. Retracting his gaze, Han Shao looked at the blue Stargate vortex in front of him. On the other side of the Stargate was a vast world full of opportunities. Dong! The next moment, the main ship entered the Stargate, and the hull shook. In an instant, only a dazzling blue light was left in his vision. Chapter 811. Godly Mechanic will be updated a little later today. Please wait for a moment. After the content is updated, please refresh the page to get the latest update. Chapter 812. Flickering World, Dawn Star Cluster. Han Zhao's main ship passed through the Stargate and instantly crossed the desolate universe belt, jumping directly from the shattered star ring to the flickering world. On the other side of the Stargate was the Dynasty's fleet. Han Shao looked out of the window, his gaze sweeping across the dense starlight that was distributed in blocks. Unlike the prosperous star field in his memories, the current flickering world was still very desolate and primitive. There were not many traces of development, and the quantum network was completely silent. The only signal that could be connected to the quantum network was the Dynasty's military base station channel, which meant that this new star field was not open to the outside world yet. Beep, beep. As soon as they passed through the Stargate, the main ship received a communication request from the Dynasty's military. After connecting, a 3D projection appeared in front of everyone. It was an old Dynasty military officer, not a stranger. Hila, who was at the side, glanced at the densely packed badges on this person's body, then glanced at the insignia on the sleeve of his military uniform, and came to the conclusion that this person was an admiral of the Dynasty, a proper high-ranking member of the military. This person's eyes locked on a Han Shao, and he nodded slightly. He did not show his imposing side and smiled gently. I'm Terakov, the Commander-in-Chief of the Flickering World Development Force, Your Excellency Black Star. Welcome to the Dawn Star Cluster. Commander-in-Chief. Han Shao nodded. Terakov was also someone he was familiar with. In his previous life, when the players were active in the Flickering World in version 4.0, Terakov was the Commander-in-Chief of the Dynasty's forces in the Flickering World. At that time, many of the Dynasty's development missions were issued in the form of military documents with Terakov's name. He was the person in charge of the Dynasty in the Flickering World, and all of the Dynasty's missions were issued by him. Now that he was leading a team to explore the Flickering World, Terakov was like half a superior, helping the Dynasty to communicate with their allies and pass on the Dynasty's orders. Han Shaoxi knew that he would have to deal with this guy for a very long time. Thankfully, Terakov was a very senior military officer and belonged to the moderate faction. He had always been steady and not difficult to get along with. It was also because of this that the Dynasty sent him over to manage the affairs of the Flickering World. Let's cut to the chase. Heber's Bloodshed Land and Clint have arrived in the Flickering World 2 days ago. Bring your troops over as soon as possible. When you arrive, we will discuss the plan for the field exploration. All right. Han Shao nodded, and Terakov cut off the call. Opening the 3D star map, the current map of the Flickering World appeared before everyone's eyes. Only the Dawn Star field was marked in green, indicating that it had been completely explored. The star map was relatively complete, while more than 90% of the other regions were gray, without any detailed information. The Dynasty had built many strongholds in the Dawn Star cluster, and the planet where the main stronghold was located at the border between the Dawn Star cluster and the unexplored region. It was an important transportation route and was named Planet Lighthouse, meaning that it was a lighthouse that guided explorers back. This was the meeting point that Terakov had marked. It will still take some time for the entire fleet to pass through the Stargate. Aurora swiped a few times on the control panel, bringing up the countdown for the assembly of the entire fleet calculated by the artificial intelligence. Sylvia, Herluz, Reynold, Lagi, and the other officers with important positions remained in the Shattered Star Ring to manage the operations of the Army headquarters. Han Shao only brought along a portion of the Army's senior officers, such as Hela, Fu Ding, Hardaway, and the rest of the Black Star Guards. Most of them were people with no duties, and they were now in charge of different tasks in the exploration team. The various subjects that Aurora had chosen to study were put to good use. She became Han Zhao's secretary and dealt with all the miscellaneous matters on this side. Philip planned the route, Han Shao said. Okay, A glowing line immediately appeared on the star map, marking the fastest route to Planet Lighthouse. The dynasty knew the importance of transportation, so they had set up a large number of military stargates in the Dawnstar cluster. They were all marked on the star map to make it convenient to jump through them, greatly reducing the travel time in the star cluster. However, this was only temporary. Han Shao knew that when the flickering world opened up, the dynasty would take back a portion of the military stargates. Han Shao thought for a while before ordering, split up a few engineering fleets, and let them leave the main force to set up our Army's quantum communication base in the Dawnstar cluster. Don't hide it from the dynasty. Just say that this is to make it easier for us to communicate with the people in the Shattered Star Ring headquarters. The quantum network spread throughout the explored universe, relying on countless base stations and network nodes. The flickering world had not completed its infrastructure yet, so it was not connected to the quantum network of the explored universe. Currently, it could only be connected through the dynasty's nodes and base stations. Han Zhao's move was to set up the Army's network base station here, spreading his own spies. When the starfield opened up in the future, it would be equivalent to a natural intelligence channel. Normally, this was the authority of an advanced civilization. Now, this was one of the benefits of the dynasty's allies, so the dynasty would not stop it. As long as the dynasty's base station was not replaced with theirs, the dynasty would let it be. The Army's battleships passed through the Stargate one after another, and very soon, everyone gathered in the flickering world. They immediately set off toward Planet Lighthouse. There were no outsiders in the Dawnstar cluster for the time being, so the fleet spent a few days passing through dozens of military stargates that connected the various strongholds. After crossing the entire Dawnstar cluster, Planet Lighthouse was in sight. Outside the porthole, what appeared in everyone's eyes was a planet surrounded by densely packed battleships. The dynasty's direct exploration team, the Bloodshed Lands exploration team, and the Clank Kingdom's exploration team were gathered on this small planet. Together with the Black Star Army's exploration team, the number of spaceships exceeded 100 million. It was a magnificent sight. In the eyes of the officers, this scene was only second to the grand battle between the Army commander and Heber. Among them, the scale of the dynasty's troops was the largest. The productivity of universal civilization was extremely developed, accounting for about 70% of the total spaceships. Not far away from the planet, there were a few Stargate stations at the same time, but they were not activated at this time. The surface of Planet Lighthouse was covered by machinery and metal, and not a single bit of soil was exposed. The dynasty's exploration team had used the dynasty's famous Idiot Planet Base expansion package on Planet Lighthouse, flattening the ground through high pressure, increasing the planet's density, and modifying the terrain and crust, directly turning this planet into a planetary-level military fortress. The fleet stopped outside the atmosphere, and Han Shao led his Black Star Guards to a small spaceship that landed on the surface of Planet Lighthouse's dock. The hatch opened. Han Shao stepped onto the metal dock, and his gaze slid past the rows of metal buildings before landing on the most eye-catching building in the distance. It was a towering tower that was a few thousand meters tall. It stood out like a crane among chickens. All the surrounding buildings looked like dwarfs under the feet of a giant. This was the stronghold headquarters of Planet Lighthouse. There were already officers waiting on the dock. After giving a military salute, they invited Han Shao and the others to board the ground vehicle and head toward the Planet Lighthouse headquarters. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. The group passed through the bases on the ground, and the wind howled. Han Shao observed for a while, and realized that the buildings on the ground were mainly hangars and resource warehouses. Countless vehicles and mechanical assistants were like hard-working ants, moving carts after carts of resources. Planet Lighthouse is the logistics base of the exploration team. A large amount of resources are stored here. The accompanying officer saw that everyone was observing the surroundings, so he explained. Han Xiao nodded. The 3-star clusters that they would explore in the first phase were Renault, Geru, and Crown. They were all neighbors of the Dawnstar cluster, and Planet Lighthouse was the best transit point. The ground journey was very short, and the group entered the Planet Lighthouse headquarters very quickly. They took the anti-gravity elevator all the way to the central floor of the headquarters, which was about 1,400 meters above ground. Following the instructions, they walked into a huge strategy meeting room. There were already many people in the room. Han Xiao squinted his eyes and saw Heber immediately. His body was like a small mountain, and he was the most eye-catching one. Heber also turned around and looked over. When his eyes met with Han Xiao, there was no sadness or joy in his eyes. He sat in his seat and did not move, casually nodding his head as a greeting. Behind him were the 8 vanguard officials of the Bloodshed Land, and they all looked to Han Xiao with unfriendly gazes. This was especially so for Chief Vanguard official Rothers. It was as if he wanted to use his gaze as a knife to stab into Han Xiao's body. Although the Black Star Corps and Bloodshed Land had reached a ceasefire agreement and agreed to not interfere with each other during the exploration period, the hostility of the Bloodshed Land officers toward Han Xiao would not decrease because of this. Humph! Seeing this, Hela's face darkened. She stepped forward, and the Black Star Guards behind her followed, staring at Heber's Vanguard official. Han Xiao's Black Star Guards and Heber's Vanguard official confronted each other. Their gazes were like laser beams that were about to collide in midair. Hela's and Rother's gazes intertwined, and the atmosphere became tense. In the past, when Han Xiao had participated in the Tyrant's Party for the second time, Rothers had challenged Han Xiao's subordinates. As the captain of the Black Star Guards, Hela had accepted the challenge. However, Heber had appeared and scolded Rothers, causing the two of them to not fight. Now that they met again, this matter appeared in both of their minds. One was the chief vanguard official of Bloodshed Land, and the other was the captain of the Black Star Corps Black Star Guards. Be it identity, status, or strength, they were natural enemies. Whoever won the fight would have the meaning of suppressing the other party. Their faces were cold, and they secretly listed each other as enemies that they would definitely fight. Now that Aurora had sufficient security, Hela worked for Han Xiao not only to repay him, but also to become stronger. Because of her past experience of being controlled by others, she had a stubborn pursuit of strength. Although she did not go to the extreme like in Han Xiao's previous life, she would not give up on the opportunity to challenge the strong. Han Xiao did not mind and waved his hands, gesturing for the Black Star Guards to retreat. It was impossible for them to fight under the dynasty's nose, so there was no point in staring at the other party. Even if they stared until their eyes were sore, they would not die. Seeing that both sides had settled down, Han Xiao chuckled at Heber. "You're early. I don't like to be late like you." Heber gave a nonchalant reply. He treated Han Xiao as someone on the same level, but he had no intention of becoming friends with him. He had decided to go his own way. Both sides had a deep grudge, and it was only because of the dynasty that they were unwilling to become allies. Although they were at peace, they were still competitors in the exploration of the flickering world. Since they were competitors in business, Heber did not want to show an overly friendly attitude. Previously, he had taken the initiative to stop the war with the Black Star Corps, which had already caused his prestige in the Bloodshed Land to drop. He did not want others to think that he was really afraid of Black Star. Han Xiao laughed. He knew what Heber was thinking and could not be bothered to argue with him. Little Tai Tai hasn't been having a good time recently, so there's no need to expose him. Ignoring Heber, Han Xiao turned to look at Terakov, who was standing beside the strategic analysis board, and said with a smile, "Chief Commander, we finally meet. Your Excellency Blackstar, Zoel might have said this before, but I still have to say it again. On behalf of the dynasty, I welcome you to join us." Earlier, When Han Shao and Heber were arguing, Terekov had been watching from the side with interest and did not say a word. Now that Han Shao had spoken, he replied with a smile. It seems like we will be colleagues for a long time in the future. Han Shao shook Terekov's hand. Please sit. Terekov smiled and gestured toward a seat. Han Shao nodded and sat down with his men. He and Heber's men each sat on one side of the room, with the Clint Kingdom's men in the middle. It was as if there was a line between them. The leader of the Clint Kingdom's team was an unfamiliar person. He looked like someone with a high position and did not have a good attitude toward Han Shao. He had not even bothered to greet him. Compared to Clint, Heber's grudge was nothing. Clint's plan for 10 years was completely overturned, and the secret war that they had been fighting for 10 years was ended by Han Shao. The resources that they had invested did not get any benefits at all. They were so lucky that their underwear was about to explode. Hate the amethyst civilization? The other party had practically won by lying down and not doing anything. Hate the Red Empire? You make it sound like I dare. Hate the bloodshed land? Wake up a little. Therefore, they could only throw all their hatred on Han Shao. If the bloodshed land's hostility toward Han Shao was 2 stars, Clint's was at least 10 stars. They hated him to the core and wanted to eat him alive. Since everyone is here, let's begin. Terekov turned a blind eye to the conflict between the 3 parties and opened the strategic analysis board behind him. He pulled out the unexplored star map of Renault, Geru, and Crown Star clusters and slapped the table. These 3 star clusters are the targets of the first exploration phase. Bloodshed Land and Clint will explore Renault. The Dynasty's direct troops will explore Crown, and the Black Star Corps will explore Geru. These are the targets that all of you have chosen long ago. Now, I will talk about the specific things to take note of. The exploration mission is very complicated, but it can be divided into a few key points. Terekov raised a few fingers and slowly said, star mapping and star mapping. Regional observation buoys, transportation network construction, transit stations, and strongholds construction, detailed information of the various planets, and resource collection. Han Shao nodded. These were the main targets. There was too much work to be done. They had to develop the map while building, and the scope was terrifyingly large. The reason they had brought so many people over was to split up and increase efficiency. This time, Terekov added, the Dynasty has the most manpower. In order to ensure progress, we will send some troops to follow the 3 of you and provide assistance. Han Shao could not help but be moved. The Dynasty's troops made up 70% of the total, so it was normal to give them some manpower. However, providing manpower was only one of the reasons. There was also the intention of monitoring. The Dynasty was willing to allow their allies to explore and share the benefits, but they were not completely free. The military inspectors were sent to prevent their allies from hiding or lying about the resources they discovered, to prevent them from secretly monopolizing the resources, and to ensure the authenticity and accuracy of the exploration results. The Dynasty has invested a lot, so of course, they have to take the majority of the resources in the new star field. Han Shao thought to himself. However, how much extra benefits the explorers could obtain was still up for debate. The others did not know what was on the unexplored planets, so they could only explore them one by one. Han Shao did not know the situation of most of the planets. Although he had been a hardcore player in his previous life, he had not memorized the information of every single planet. However, he was still very clear about some of the extremely famous and unique planets in the flickering world. This meant that he did not need to explore to know which planets were extremely rich. Han Shao stroked his chin and fell in a deep thought. Remember the mobile version of the website, M818 Black, Sheep, All, page 1/1, bookmark for easier reading. Chapter 8:13. Heber and the Clint commander knew that the Dynasty would send out surveillance troops, so they were not surprised either. Terekov pointed at the star map and explained the things they needed to pay attention to. Everyone listened in silence. When Terekov was done, the Clint commander suddenly asked, "What do you know? We understand what you just said, but I want to ask you something else. Our allies in the Shattered Star Ring are the first to participate in the exploration, and the dynasty will arrange for allies from other star fields to join in. When will the next batch of allies arrive? The star field was too vast. Although they seemed to have a lot of people, if they were thrown into a star field, they would only be a small wave in the ocean, very small and insignificant. Who knew how long it would take for them to finish exploring the flickering world with just a few of them? Therefore, the dynasty would send more people to explore the flickering world in the future, and the dynasty's allies would be their new competitors. What Clint cared about was when the next batch of competitors would arrive and how much time they had ahead. Tarakov smiled. This will depend on the arrangements of the dynasty's upper echelons and the progress of our exploration. I have not received the exact time, but I estimate that the dynasty will send out the next batch of exploration teams at least half a year later. Before that, the dynasty will have to rely on all of you. If the exploration progress is satisfactory, the dynasty will not be stingy with the rewards. The few of them nodded. If the exploration was successful and the results exceeded expectations, it would all become their contribution. The dynasty would take over the majority of the resources, so they would be rewarded according to the results. This was the main point of the competition. The more successful the exploration was, and the more bountiful the harvest was, the greater the contribution. Tarakov paused for a moment before asking, "Since all of you have chosen the star cluster to explore, which direction do you plan to enter from?" A star cluster was extremely large and could be split into dozens of star systems. They were all exploring from the edge to the center. The border was extremely long, so the direction of entry was extremely important. If they started from a barren area and did not find many resources, it would be a huge loss. The reference information of the exploration team was only a half-completed star map from astronomical observations. At most, they would avoid the obvious desolate universe belts with sparse planets. However, the resources of every planet were unknown. Although Tarakov only asked now, the few of them had already analyzed the situation and had a plan. Heber and Clint were on the same side. They planned to split into 23 teams and enter a chosen star system from 23 locations. The troops were not too far apart from each other and were arranged in a comb shape. The 23 troops were prepared to advance side by side, respond to each other, and gradually converge at a certain point to establish a large transit point. Then, they would continue to spread out and explore, trying not to let the exploration range of each troop overlap. Han Shao nodded silently as he listened to the Clint commander describe the plan. Heber had made a good choice. The first area to be explored was called the Geratin star system. In his previous life, it was a rather rich star system in the Renault star cluster. It was indeed rich in resources. If the star map of the flickering world was planarized and connected to the explored universe, then the Dawn star cluster would be located at the westernmost edge of the flickering world. The three star clusters that bordered it from north to south were Guru, Renault, and Crown. Renault would be in the middle, and its geographical location was superior. The Geratin star system that Heber and Clint first explored was the border star system southwest of Renault. Tarakov nodded and turned to look at Han Shao. "What about you?" Han Shao pointed at the border star system in the southernmost part of the Gera star cluster. Then, he drew a route that connected the southernmost and easternmost parts of the Gera star cluster. "What do you mean by this?" Tarakov was shocked. "All right." Han Shao smiled mysteriously and casually said, "I will let the majority of the troops explore the border star system in the southernmost part. At the same time, I will send out a special force to bring the Stargate equipment along. They will only set up Stargates along the way and will not stop at any other time. I will first build a Stargate route to connect these star systems." "You want to build a long-distance transportation route first?" Tarakov raised his brows. "Not only that, every time the special force connects to the next star system, I will continuously send people to explore the other star systems." Han Shao shrugged and did not change his expression. Upon hearing this, Tarakov frowned slightly. Heber and the Clint commander also looked at each other speechlessly. In their eyes, the problem with Black Star's exploration plan was too obvious. They did not have enough manpower. With so few people, it would take a lot of time to explore a single star system. Black Star wanted to explore more than a dozen star systems together. Would they have enough manpower? Their appetite was too big, and they had already exceeded their limits. Building a long-distance transportation route first was a good thing for the dynasty, and Terekov did not have any objections. However, this was not in the interest of the dynasty's allies, so Han Zhao's decision was out of his expectations. This was not a race to connect more than a dozen star systems, and it would be useless even if they could not finish exploring them. Since the efficiency of exploration was limited, wasting manpower to build a long-distance stargate would only benefit those who came later. With the dynasty around, it was impossible for them to monopolize the stargate and not lend it to their allies. Thus, it would be more convenient for those who came later to compete with them in other star systems. Clint and Bloodshed Land would rather explore one star system before heading to the next one. In comparison, they were exploring in a large area, while Han Zhao was exploring in a straight line. In order to balance the interests of their allies, the dynasty's plan was also to proceed gradually and explore slowly. They were not prepared to build a complete Stargate transportation network in the unexplored areas immediately. That was because the Astronomical Observatory had already given them a half-completed star map, and they did not lack a complete map. What they lacked was actual exploration and information. Thus, the goal of the first exploration phase was only to build a bridgehead in the 3 areas that bordered the Dawn Star Cluster. During the exploration process, the exploration team had been building stargates. Thus, long-distance stargates would naturally appear, and there was actually no need to send people to build them. In that case, the Black Star Corps would be wasting their own resources and time. This made Terekov, Heber, and the Clint commander very confused. "Do you want to reconsider?" Terekov asked kindly. Han Zhao waved his hands and chuckled. "No need. I like to try my luck. Who knows, I might be able to discover some fertile resource planets in advance." Seeing that Black Star was so stubborn, the Clint commander looked on coldly and snorted in his heart. Such an exploration plan that had not been carefully considered would definitely not be successful. They would most likely be able to defeat the Black Star Corps and outshine Black Star. All right, Terekov did not try to persuade him anymore. No matter how their allies explored, the dynasty would not lose anything. After all, the entire star field belonged to them. The only thing that would be lost was the Black Star Corps' own interests. Since Black Star did not care, he would not care either. Han Zhao had a smile on his face, and the others could not see through his thoughts. In truth, such an exploration plan that seemed to be in a rush for success was the most beneficial for him. The reason why Zoel said that there would be the least number of organizations exploring the Garrus Star Cluster was because there were obvious desolate universe belts in the few star systems south of the Garrus Star Cluster. Furthermore, there were not many resources there. If he followed Heber and only explored a border star system, the result would be obvious. He would definitely not be able to obtain any merits. The reason he chose such an exploration plan was so that he could be the first to explore those famous rich planets in his memories. There were a few star systems that were extremely prosperous in his previous life along this transportation route from the south to the east of the Garrus Star Cluster. There were many famous planets in those star systems that were rich in resources. Currently, only he knew about them. After extending the exploration route, the dynasty's surveillance troops might be separated from each other, and there would be room for maneuvering. With such a good opportunity, Han Zhao would definitely not give it up. If the Black Star Corps slowly advanced, it would be like throwing away a watermelon after picking up sesame seeds. They would be leaving empty-handed after entering a treasure mountain. It would be a loss. The second reason was to create a smokescreen. Han Zhao hoped to reach the east of the Garrus Star Cluster as soon as possible without being caught off guard. That was because the ownerless universal treasure in the flickering world was located in another star cluster to the east of the Garrus Star Cluster. Only by establishing this Stargate route would he be able to obtain the ownerless universal treasure as soon as possible. Terekov closed the star map and said with a deep voice, "Then it's decided. You guys wait here for 2 days. I will transfer the troops to your team and hand over the Stargate, buoys, and other exploration equipment to you guys. We will set off in 2 days. Okay. The Clink commander nodded. Han Shao and Heber nodded and did not say anything. Everyone stood up and left the conference room. Walking out of the door, Han Shao and Heber looked at each other. It was as if a knife had clashed, creating sparks. Then, the two of them turned around and left in the opposite direction with their officers. What do you think Black Star is thinking? Heber and Clint walked together. On the way, a Vanguard official could not help but ask Chief of Staff Jode. What are you trying to say? Jode glanced at him. Do you think we don't know Black Star's character? He's cunning and scheming. He's not someone who is willing to take a loss. Since he knows that there are no benefits to building a long-distance Stargate route first, he must have other intentions. Jode's eyes flickered. Indeed, Black Star's decision is a little weird. Chief of Staff, what do you think his motive is? The people around all pricked up their ears and eavesdropped. I'm not Black Star. Jode sighed. The only thing I can think of is that Black Star is not willing to explore the barren border star systems of the Garrus star cluster. However, there's no need for him to waste time crossing more than 10 star systems. I can't think of any other reason. Maybe his appetite is too big, or maybe he really wants to try his luck. Could it be that he wants to take over a planet that will be the future transportation hub? You're thinking too much. The dynasty will not allow one organization to control too many strategic locations. Because the flickering world was a new star field that had yet to be developed, everyone subconsciously set the condition that no one knew the exact situation of the flickering world. Therefore, no one could guess Han Zhao's motive. The Clink commander's eyes flashed, and he quickly walked to Heber's side. Your Excellency, Tyrant, do you think we should finish your sentence? Don't make me guess. Heber looked straight ahead. Do you want to send someone to the Garrus star cluster in secret to monitor Black Star's movements? What's the point? Heber glanced at him and asked, do you dare to interfere with the exploration work in front of the dynasty? The Clink commander was stunned. He thought about it carefully and realized something. Exploring the flickering world was an important strategic goal of the dynasty. Therefore, even if they knew what the Black Star Corps was doing, they could not interfere. If they interfered with the exploration progress for personal gain, the dynasty would not show mercy and would definitely make an example out of them to show the other allied organizations that participated in the exploration what the consequences of messing with the dynasty's strategy were. Thinking of this, the Clink commander backed away and did not mention this matter again. His eyes flickered. It seemed like if they wanted to surpass the Black Star Corps, they could only compete openly with their exploration results. However, luckily, Black Star had chosen the Garrus star cluster and used a short-sighted exploration plan. They and the Bloodshed Land would definitely win. Chapter 814. The fleet stayed on Planet Lighthouse for 2 days and received all kinds of exploration equipment from Tarakov. Large alloy containers were transported to the Black Star Corps' transport ships and placed neatly. These were all exploration supplies provided by the dynasty, such as the Stargate equipment, the foolproof planetary fortress expansion pack, the universe monitoring buoys used to perfect the star map and provide dynamic environment monitoring functions, and so on. They were all military equipment and would not be circulated in the regular interstellar market. At most, they would occasionally appear in the black market. Han Shao got Philip to count them. He received about 500 sets of Stargate equipment, 6,000 foolproof planetary fortress expansion packs, and 15 billion universe monitoring buoys. They were not given to him, but borrowed mission items. They would last for some time. Furthermore, Tarakov had sent a dynasty fleet to temporarily join the Black Star Army to assist him in exploring the Garrus star cluster. The commander of this fleet was a major general under Tarakov called Seneco. Tarakov was stationed on Planet Lighthouse as the commander, and the few dynasty fleets he sent out all had their own commanders. Seneco was Tarakov's direct subordinate and one of the dynasty officers stationed in the flickering world in Han Zhao's memories. Because they would be partners in the future exploration period, Han Shao met with Seneco and reached a simple agreement. Seneco expressed that he would not interfere with the exploration plan of the Black Star Corps and would only provide assistance. After 2 days of preparation, the chief commander finally announced the start of the operation. The various fleets on Planet Lighthouse went their separate ways and headed to the star cluster of their choice. The Renault star cluster was explored by the Bloodshed Land and Clint, the Geru star cluster by the Black Star Corps, and the Crown star cluster by the remaining Dynasty fleets. In comparison, the Crown star cluster had the most people exploring it, while the Geru star cluster had the least. The Black Star Corps fleet and Seneco's fleet headed toward the border star system at the southernmost tip of the Geru star cluster. Before they set off, Han Shao had already informed all the members of the army about the exploration plan, including the millions of players. He placed all kinds of jobs on the faction mission list, such as exploring planets, setting up buoys, and so on. They were also divided into different areas. There were many missions, but each had a limit on the number of people who could participate in them, allowing the millions of army players to choose from. The various exploration missions caused discussions on the forums. This was because the mechanism of the Flickering World main storyline missions was a point system, which was divided into individual points and group points. Different exploration missions would give different amounts of points, which would depend on the actual harvest. Only when the mission was completed would they know how many points they would be awarded. At this time, the players could only guess and analyze, but they still enjoyed it. On the forum, players generally agreed that exploring planets was theoretically the most profitable. Discovering resources, discovering life, researching the history of the planet, mining resources, and so on would all be rewarded with points. The process was full of unknown interest. In the eyes of the players, the other missions, such as setting up the monitoring buoys, setting up the stargates, and building the Stronghold Transit Station, were all laborious tasks. Currently, the number of people choosing them was the least. Han Shao knew that once the players figured out the exploration process, the guilds would begin to compete openly and covertly. The large guilds hoped to use the resource-rich planets as their resource points. Although they could only obtain a small portion of the total amount of resources mined, it was already extremely generous for the average player. In his previous life, there were 2 important reasons why the players of the various countries in the Flickering World fought each other. One was faction fighting, and the other was fighting for resource points. Now, however, the millions of players belonged to his own faction, so faction fighting would not occur. Thus, fighting for resource points was the only reason. Han Shao was clear that in order to fight for the various planets with rare resources, the guilds would compete fiercely, and guild wars would frequently break out. Although it had not reached that stage yet, he knew in his heart that competition would definitely occur, especially now that there were club guilds from different countries in the army. Another reason he wanted to encourage the new and old players to socialize was to plan ahead and minimize the impact of the guild competition on the ordinary players. It was inevitable that ordinary players would fight each other for fun. What he wanted to prevent was an obvious hostility between the ordinary players. Thus, he used the 2 faction contribution points missions to encourage the players of the various countries to actively make friends. As long as there were no obvious cracks in the internal players, the guild competition would not be a loss for him. After all, the players' equipment would have to be repaired if it was damaged. The various fleets sailed for a few days before entering their designated positions and officially starting their exploration work. The Black Star Corps exploration team arrived at the southernmost star system of the Geru star cluster. According to the plan, they built the first transit station to connect to the Dawn star cluster. The engineering team used a foolproof planetary fortress expansion package on a desolate planet at the edge of the star system. A transport ship opened the launch bay, and hundreds of thousands of giant mechanical bases with space thrusters flew out. They looked like steel nails. These are the fortress nodes. The fortress nodes arranged themselves in the outer space of the planet. The distance between the nodes was the same, forming a huge net that covered the entire planet. Then, the thrusters of the nodes of the fortresses spurted out surging orange exhaust flames and broke through the outer space. Like hundreds of thousands of space-based gravity weapons, They landed on the surface of the planet and stabbed deep into the crust, raising boundless dust. The next step was that all the fortress nodes were activated. A crimson light shone from the top, and they started to modify the planet's atmosphere and terrain. Every node was vibrating, and shock waves burst out, causing rumbling earthquakes. The underground rock layers were torn apart, and large amounts of metal structures were poured in. Silver and gray metal extended out from the fortress nodes and covered the ground, turning the planet's surface into metal. According to the preset program, these engineering alloys with nanomodification ability automatically transformed and assembled. Bases, fortresses, and warehouses were built one after another. Dozens of hours later, the initial modification was completed. This desolate planet had a brand new look, turning into a silver and gray planetary fortress, becoming the first stronghold of the Garrus star cluster. The dynasty's engineering spaceships were not idle either. They used tractor beams to drag huge pieces of Stargate components and assembled the Stargate next to this stronghold. The Stargate that was not activated looked like a huge, hollow mechanical ring. After it was activated, the inner ring of the mechanical ring lit up with a blue light like an indicator light, releasing space energy. According to the preset coordinates, it connected to one of the Stargates near Planet Lighthouse. After the activation process was completed, the hollow part of the mechanical ring turned into a wormhole-like blue vortex, turning into a complete Stargate. Other than the team that stayed behind to build the stronghold, the rest spread out. Some went to the surrounding areas to set up space monitoring buoys, while others went to explore the unknown planets. This star system was divided into about 10 star zones. At this time, the Black Star Corps started to explore the first star zone. According to the plan, Han Shao sent out a special task force led by Hardaway with 150 sets of Stargate equipment. Their goal was to cross more than 10 star systems to head to the east of the Garrus star cluster and build a long-distance Stargate passage. The spaceships of the Special Task Force were all high-grade warp-speed transport ships with a limit of 14. 1 warp speed. They would need about 4 months to cross such a long distance to reach their destination. When the Special Task Force built a long-distance Stargate passage, the 4-month journey would be shortened to a few hours. Because it was not a direct Stargate, they would need to transit through more than 10 star systems, so they would need some extra time to travel. Countless Army members worked together, and Han Shao himself was not idle. He took the main ship and led a group of normal Army warriors and players to explore a planet at the center of this star zone. In his memory, this planet was a trade transit station in his previous life. It was one of the gateways into the Garrus star cluster. It was quite valuable, and it did not have a harsh environment. It was a habitable planet with indigenous civilizations. Now, this planet did not have a name, only a serial number. It was a good opportunity to occupy it and develop it. At the outer border of the shattered star ring, this was the edge of the explored universe, separated from the flickering world by a long, desolate universe belt. Fleets left the border from different directions, turning into hyperdrive streams of light and entering the desolate universe belt, heading straight for the flickering world. The news of the Red Empire developing the flickering world had spread throughout the galaxy. Although the dynasty had banned other civilizations from entering, an agreement was not enough to scare off the advanced organizations. They all wanted to bypass the dynasty's monopoly and enter the flickering world in advance. These fleets were not the first batch. They came from different civilizations and organizations and did not want to be discovered by the dynasty, so they hid their identities. Because they could not use the dynasty's stargates, they could only sneak into the flickering world with the Stargate equipment, planning to secretly build a secret Stargate passage to avoid the dynasty surveillance. Even if these fleets had very high warp speed, it would take them a very long time to cross the desolate universe belt and reach the flickering world. Among these stowaways, most of them were doing it for benefits, while a small group had ulterior motives. One of them was the direct subordinates that the Arcane Church had secretly sent. I've caught a cold and slept for 11 hours. My mind is not very clear. I have to pack my things tonight and catch a flight tomorrow morning, so I'll be writing less in the next 2 to 3 days. I'll try not to take leave. Chapter 8:15. Shattered Star Ring, Blue Star. The blue planet rotated slowly. Occasionally, streams of light would fly out from the planet, and there would also be streams of light coming from the universe. Batches of spaceships were arriving and departing. The sun shone on the capital city filled with skyscrapers, and the windows reflected the blue sky and white clouds. Trains whizzed past along the tracks in the sky, and anti-gravity vehicles shuttled between the cities. The entire city was filled with life, and it was a peaceful and prosperous scene. At the dock of the capital Black Star City, Bennett was waiting with a bunch of people. Standing in front of the window and looking down at the lively capital, Bennett had a gratified expression on his face. After Han Xiao helped Blue Star join the Shattered Star Ring Civilization Conference, many financial groups and organizations placed more importance on the development of Blue Star, which brought a new round of development opportunities for Blue Star. Trade became more frequent, and it became more and more prosperous. The people of Blue Star, who had experienced many hardships, were smiling more and more. The more they enjoyed the prosperity of their mother planet, the more they admired Black Star, who had brought them all of this. A spaceship entered the dock, and the hatch opened. A few army soldiers escorted Nero out of the spaceship. When Nero saw Bennett, he had an expression of reuniting with his family and quickly ran to Bennett. "Dad!" Bennett turned around and looked at him with confusion. "Why are you back so quickly? What did Black Star bring you to do in the universe?" Nero scratched his head and said with a depressed tone, "I spent most of my time learning mechanic theory. Godfather brought me out for a vacation for a few days and then threw me back down. Han Xiao had brought a large number of troops to develop the flickering world and did not know when he would be back. Naturally, he did not bring Nero along and instructed Sylvia to send him back to Blue Star." As he spoke, Nero was a little depressed. "Mr. Reynolds said that this is just a vacation for me. He also gave me vacation homework. He said that I can only come back for 2 months. After that, he will send someone to pick me up and bring me to his side to continue learning mechanic knowledge." Reynolds had received Han Xiao's orders to teach Nero when Han Xiao wasn't around. Reynolds carried out this responsibility seriously and had already arranged a year's worth of lessons for Nero. "Black Star is willing to train you. This is a rare opportunity. Don't let him down." Bennett chuckled and squatted down so that he was at the same height as Nero. He looked at his child kindly and asked, "Tell me what you've seen in the universe." Nero counted on his fingers and explained everything in detail with a happy tone. Although the homework that Han Xiao had given him made him depressed, this was his first time in space, and he had seen all sorts of strange things. Thus, Nero was very satisfied with this trip. As Bennett listened, he nodded with a smile and sighed in his heart. He could sense that Han Xiao had high hopes for Nero, and it wasn't just because he was his child. Nero seemed to have some sort of talent that Han Xiao valued, and Bennett was very proud of this. The child that he had created had such outstanding talent. It seemed like his genes were still very outstanding. Bennett was secretly considering if he should have a second child. He wasn't willing to be too materialistic, but considering the future of Blue Star, if he had a few more children with outstanding talent, and they all became Black Star students, the bond between Blue Star and Black Star would be even stronger. Although he was old, his body as a pugilist was still full of energy. In the Blue Star's list of the most popular and charming men, Bennett, as the leader of Blue Star, was ranked second. He was loved and supported by countless people. The popularity of the people was one of the reasons. On the other hand, his status, age, and strong body formed the charm of a stable and reliable old man. As for the number one most popular and charming man in Blue Star, it was undoubtedly Han Xiao. No one could shake his position. With so many achievements as a foundation, no matter how the Blue Star people looked at him, they felt that he was very handsome. Not long after, Nero's throat was parched from talking, and he took a deep breath. He wanted to excitedly share what he had seen and heard in the universe. Bennett stopped him and rubbed his head. He stood up and said, "All right, when you have time later, you can tell me more in detail." Go home and rest first. I still have to wait for someone here." Nero was astonished. "Aren't you here to pick me up?" Bennett shook his head and turned to look at the universe outside the window. "I still have to receive an extremely important guest." At the same time, far away from Blue Star, a secret blue cocoon-shaped spaceship was hovering in the universe. Through the over-the-horizon mode, it was observing the Blue Star from afar. "This is Blue Star, Black Star's mother planet." In the cockpit of the spaceship, a creature with secret blue skin stared at the screen and said with a cold tone. He was the captain of the spaceship. He had 4 arms and 3 eyes, and all the crew members behind him had the same body structure as him. This spaceship was full of star pupil god race members. The captain turned to look at the crew members and said coldly, "Black Star took away our national treasure. This is a humiliation to our entire race. Our leaders are weak, and our compatriots have to swallow their anger. What they can and don't dare to do, we, the Avidan souls, can and dare to do." The captain's tone was firm, and all the crew members were agitated. They gripped the weapons in their hands tightly with indignation. Because of the evolution cube, planet Avidan was attacked, and countless compatriots were sacrificed. Our family and friends all died in that disaster. With so many people dead, we can't allow the evolution cube to fall into the hands of others. Maybe the culprit of that attack is not only ES God, but also Black Star. The captain pointed in the direction of Blue Star and roared, "Only by taking revenge with blood can we make Black Star regret his shameless actions. We will make him understand that the humiliation he gave the star pupil god race and the despair he gave us will be repaid by someone." The crew members all had a common enemy and roared. Back then, ES God had almost massacred more than half of planet Avidan in order to lure the tiger away from the mountain. That disaster was a painful memory for the star pupil holy race, and the anger of losing everything made some of the survivors lose their rationality and go to extremes. An extremist organization was born from that, called Avidan Souls of the Dead. These extremists were basically the survivors of Avidan or had relatives or friends who had died in the disaster. Because they had lost their national treasure, the evolution cube, Cisco's prestige, and the star pupil god race had declined. The extremists blamed the tragedy of Avidan on Cisco's incompetence and deeply hated the culprit, ES God. Because the source of the disaster on planet Avidan was the evolution cube, and so many of their compatriots had sacrificed themselves for it, the Avidan souls had a morbid obsession with the evolution cube. Thus, they also hated Black Star, who had taken the evolution cube from the star pupil god race. The evolution cube was the national treasure in the eyes of the star pupil god race, and this view had been maintained for many years. Now that the evolution cube had a new owner, the star pupil god race had always been hostile toward Han Shao. The Avidan souls were even more extreme. Cisco was unable to take back the evolution cube, and seemed to have stopped because he was afraid of the dynasty. This made the Avidan souls lose confidence in Cisco and decide to use extreme methods to take revenge on Black Star. Hearing that Han Shao had left the Shattered Star Ring for a long time, the Avidan souls felt that the time had come. They decided to use this opportunity to fearlessly attack Black Star's mother planet and carry out a terrifying revenge, making Black Star, who was far away on the horizon, watch as his mother planet was destroyed. Blue Star was now a member of the Shattered Star Ring Civilization Conference, and even Cisco could not act recklessly. However, this kind of rule that the upper echelons had to abide by was not something that the extremists were willing to consider. They were unexpected factors that ignored the rules and did not care about the consequences at all. Everything they had was destroyed, and their rationality had been burned away by their anger. Although Cisco was recognized as the best leader of the star pupil god race, he could not control the thoughts of every member of his race. There would always be extreme cases in every group, and there would always be people who were blinded by hatred. Even the star pupil god race, who had an extremely high average level of evolution, could not avoid internal disagreements. The captain turned to look at his deputy. "How's the status of the weapons?" The deputy nodded heavily. 5 super heavy nuclear psionic annihilation bombs are operating well and can be fired at any time. Very good. It's said that one of these bombs can destroy an entire continent, and more than 3 of them can destroy the surface of a planet. Our goal is to release all the bombs on Blue Star and let this planet die with us. We will let them feel the pain of Avidan. The captain's tone was vicious. The people on the ship did not plan to leave alive. Although the power of these high-level psionic bombs could not be compared to primordial psionic energy, they were still restricted weapons that the 3 universal civilizations prohibited from casually using. They would leave behind a terrifying psionic pollution effect, and only star cluster civilizations would have them. The Avitan Souls was an extremist organization that had not been established for long and did not have the corresponding technological strength. The bombs were actually secretly funded by someone, and the sponsor was the star cluster civilization in the area where the star pupil god race was located. They had always viewed the rising star pupil god race as a threat. Because of the background of the arcane church, they could not openly target the star pupil god race. However, the birth of the Avitan Souls gave this star cluster civilization an opportunity to obstruct their opponent. Thus, they used the name of a puppet organization to secretly support the Avidan Souls in an attempt to create trouble for the star pupil god race. Just as the captain was about to give the order to take action, a light suddenly appeared at the corner of the observation radar. Warning: an unknown large target is approaching. Everyone turned around and looked in the corresponding direction through the porthole. They saw a floating island in the universe flying over from afar, wrapped in a large yellow shield. Floating dragon? The captain recognized this floating island that everyone in the Shattered Star Ring knew about and wondered why it would appear there. From the looks of it, it was heading toward Blue Star. The floating dragon island slowly approached this secret blue cocoon-shaped spaceship. Compared to the size of the two, it was like an elephant compared to a sesame seed. Next to Floating Dragon, this spaceship produced by the star pupil god race was as tiny as a speck of dust. Let's move aside. Don't block Floating Dragon's path. The captain hurriedly ordered the pilot to move to the side. Floating Dragon was a neutral organization and would not actively attack any passing spaceships. He planned to stop the operation and wait for Floating Dragon to leave before attacking Blue Star. Everyone was below Floating Dragon. Looking through the porthole, they could only see the rocks at the bottom of Floating Dragon. The pilot raised the spaceship and flew above Floating Dragon's horizon, level with the city's horizon. The captain and the others were stunned. They suddenly realized that Ames, who was wearing a black dress, was standing at the most eye-catching spot of Floating Dragon's dock. She was actually staring at their spaceship. She's looking at us? Just as this thought appeared in everyone's mind, an unparalleled force field suddenly descended. Pooh! Blood splattered everywhere. The bodies of all the star pupil god race members on the spaceship were squashed at the same time, turning into red and blue meat paste. Their minds were frozen at the last thought, and they died without any warning. At Floating Dragon's dock, Ames casually put down her hand and retracted the force field. She then ordered Vilna, who was waiting by the side, search this spaceship and see if there are any dangerous weapons hidden inside. Okay. Vilna immediately went to organize the manpower. Then, Ames turned to look at Aesop, who was beside her, and raised her brows slightly. Are you sure the people on this spaceship are plotting against Blue Star? You didn't kill the wrong people, right? Aesop stroked his beard and chuckled. You want to move Floating Dragon to Blue Star, so I made a prophecy about Blue Star a few days ago. These people are Cisco's people. They seem to want to destroy Blue Star to take revenge on Black Star because of the evolution cube. Although these people did not succeed in the end and were destroyed by the ground-to-air dark energy rail defense cannon that Black Star left here. Since we're here, we might as well help. Ames shook her head and said with some helplessness, I didn't expect that we would really become his home guard. Aesop glanced at her and said, Didn't you move Floating Dragon to Blue Star to help Black Star protect his mother planet? Heh, I'm maximizing the benefits of Floating Dragon and carrying out the agreement between allies. What does it have to do with him? Even if it's for others, it's for my 2 students. Ames turned around and left. Her black dress was like a blooming flower, floating close to the ground. Aesop watched Ames leave before turning to look at Jenny, whose hair was getting thinner day by day. "We're almost at Blue Star. Inform them." Jenny nodded expressionlessly. Bennett had been standing at the dock, looking up at the universe. A shadow suddenly appeared under their feet and quickly expanded, covering the entire dock. A gigantic floating island appeared in his line of sight. It slowly approached planet Aquamarine and enlarged in Bennett's line of sight. Bennett smiled. The guests are finally here. Chapter 816. Floating Dragon Island hovered near Blue Star like a gigantic satellite. When the people on the surface looked up, they would be able to see a gigantic golden island in the sky. Countless people had a shocked expression on their faces. They stopped in their tracks and looked up on the streets, discussing among themselves. "What is that? It looks a little familiar." An old man pressed on his glasses with trembling hands and activated the binoculars function. "Mom, I've seen it in textbooks before. That's the legendary floating dragon island that floats in the universe. The palace of the Dragon Emperor," a child said with an agitated tone, pulling the hand of an auntie beside him and pointing at the sky. "Oh, so it's Ames." The auntie was enlightened. After Blue Star broke through the blockade of Ghidorah's quantum network and connected to the galaxy, the people's knowledge level had increased tremendously in the past decade or so. They now had some understanding of the universe's environment and the famous people in the Shattered Star Ring. Because of Han Xiao, the survivors of Blue Star's mutation era were very familiar with Ames. Not only did the people know that she was once Black Star's boss, but they also remembered that the turning point of their connection to the galaxy came from the protection of Floating Dragon Island. Ames had a special place in the hearts of the people of Blue Star. Seeing Floating Dragon Island appear near Blue Star, many people could not help but feel surprised and confused. They called their friends and shared the news, which attracted a lot of attention. The people of the various financial groups who stayed in Blue Star also noticed Floating Dragon Island and were shocked. They hurriedly asked the Blue Star government, desperately wanting to know the reason. At the same time, Ames and the others arrived at the dock in a small spaceship and met with Bennett. "Your Excellency Dragon Emperor, Blue Star welcomes your arrival." Bennett bowed, his tone solemn and full of respect. He was very familiar with Han Xiao, and they had been friends for over 20 years. This was why his attitude was so casual. However, he wasn't that familiar with Ames. Bennett followed the common etiquette in the interstellar space. Even though he knew that Han Xiao had a close relationship with Ames, he didn't dare to overstep his boundaries. Ames waved her hand, indicating that there was no need to be so polite. She chuckled and said, "Black Star has told me about my request, and Jenny has also contacted you. I came to see you this time, mainly to go through the motions." Bennett nodded. He had received a notification from Han Xiao some time ago that Floating Dragon was going to be stationed in Blue Star. At that time, he had been shocked, but he had been overjoyed. He had realized that this was a rare opportunity, so he had hurriedly mobilized his manpower to cooperate with Floating Dragon. According to Ames' plan, this matter would be kept a secret before it was confirmed. She would only announce it after everything was done. The goal was to create a surprise and cause a commotion in the star field. This would be beneficial for Floating Dragon to break the old impression and let more galactic residents have a new understanding of Floating Dragon. For this reason, Bennett had not announced it to the people of Blue Star in advance and only planned to announce it now. "I will hold a press conference in the name of Blue Star and announce that Floating Dragon will be building a base here. How long will it take? Only a few hours? Some galactic media outlets have people here, so it won't take too long to invite them. What do you think?" Ames nodded and agreed. Floating Dragon will be staying here for a long time. She was here to attend the press conference and let others confirm the authenticity of this matter. "By the way, I just met a group of extremists from the Star Pupil Protoss race. They were wandering around Blue Star, and there were dangerous psionic bombs in their cabins. They seemed to want to attack Blue Star. I killed them and seized their spaceship. There are videos on it, so I'll leave them to you guys. It has nothing to do with me. Bennett was stunned for a moment. Star Pupil Protoss Race. This is because of Black Star, right? Their hatred for Black Star has been transferred to Blue Star. I will inform His Excellency Black Star. Bennett's tone was serious. Since it involved the race of another beyond grade A, it was not easy for him, the leader of a civilization that had yet to reach the star system level. So he planned to ask for Han Zhao's opinion. Although this incident was stopped in time, it could be said that Black Star had implicated Blue Star, causing Blue Star to suffer an unexpected calamity. Blue Star had suffered a similar calamity in the past. For example, Stephanie, under Thousand Shadows, had seen Blue Star as a weakness in order to deal with Black Star. However, Bennett did not have any complaints. He knew very well that since he was enjoying the benefits brought by Black Star, he would definitely be noticed by Black Star's enemies. There was no such thing as a sure win and no loss. A high-level battle was like a stormy sea, and Blue Star was just a small boat in the middle of the ocean. If they were not careful, they would be affected, and the boat would be destroyed. However, if they were to give up the opportunity to rise up their civilization and turn away from their protector just because they were afraid of Black Star's enemies, this would be the behavior of a younger brother. If the Six Nations had been in power in the past, they might have considered such a choice, but Bennett would not have been swayed. Now that Floating Dragon had arrived, the safety index of Blue Star would be raised by a few levels, and no one would think of Blue Star as a weakness of Black Star anymore. This hidden danger was solved instantly. Bennett naturally did not know the motive of Ames coming to Blue Star, so the way he saw it, Han Zhao definitely had something to do with this matter. Otherwise, Ames would not have come. He could not help but admire Han Zhao's foresight. 3 hours later, many galactic media outlets gathered together, and the reporters were waiting for the arrival of the spokesperson in the government building. The moment Floating Dragon appeared, the Blue Star government rushed to hold a press conference. It should be related to Floating Dragon. For them to invite us so urgently, there might be something big to announce. It can't be. Floating Dragon drifts everywhere and never stays in one place for too long. It's not surprising that it came to Blue Star by chance. While the reporters were whispering to each other, they suddenly heard many government workers carrying equipment in and setting up broadcast equipment in the venue. Seeing this, the reporters were shocked. Was this going to be broadcasted to the entire world? Usually, it would only be used for big events. Just as the reporters were guessing, the door of the venue opened with a bang. All the reporters turned around, and their eyes widened with shock. The person who came in was not the Blue Star government spokesperson they were familiar with, but the head of the government, Bennett. Beside him was a famous person who shocked all the reporters. It was the Dragon Emperor Ames. What? All the reporters were shocked. This was the Blue Star government's press conference, and Ames was actually here. Dumbfounded, they stared at Bennett and Ames as they walked onto the stage. There's something I want to announce to the entire world and even the entire star field. Bennett cleared his throat, looked around, and said with a solemn tone, "From today onward, Floating Dragon will be staying in Blue Star's atmosphere for a long time. On behalf of the Aquamarine Federation, I welcome our new neighbor." Without waiting for the reporters to react, Ames opened her mouth. "Floating Dragon has drifted for too long, and I've decided to stop. From today onward, this will be Floating Dragon's headquarters." The entire venue was so silent that one could hear a pin drop. Boom! The next moment, an uproar broke out. Everyone's expression changed drastically. All the reporters were trembling with excitement. They had encountered big news. The news of Floating Dragon building a headquarters in Blue Star spread like wildfire and swept across the Shattered Star Ring like a hurricane. All the organizations that knew about it were shocked. Floating Dragon had stopped drifting. In the eyes of the galactic residents, this was a sign that Ames was no longer lazy and was going to officially start managing her organization. However, this was not the most shocking thing. What shocked the entire star field the most was that Floating Dragon's headquarters was actually located on Black Star's mother planet. All the organizations knew that the Black Star Corps' most obvious headquarters was usually located on planet Golden Gate. However, After Han Xiao obtained a seat in the Shattered Star Ring Civilization Conference with the help of the Blue Star Civilization, many people thought that Blue Star had become Black Star's second headquarters, not to mention that this was his mother planet. So, what was Floating Dragon trying to do? Building their own headquarters in Black Star's headquarters? Was it just the alliance between the two beyond Grade A organizations that had become closer? No, it was definitely not just that. Back when Heber challenged them to a battle, Black Star had been on the same side as Dragon Emperor. The fact that the Black Star Corps and Floating Dragon were allies was something that everyone in the Shattered Star Ring knew. However, while they were allies, the territories of the two organizations were clearly separated. The Black Star Corps had many branches, while Floating Dragon had no fixed territory. However, Floating Dragon had actually chosen to stay in Blue Star. This was not a random branch, but their own headquarters. For a galactic organization like this, if there was no special reason, even if they were allies, they would not allow their headquarters to be in the same place. At most, they would set up a branch in their allies' territory. The Dragon Emperor had obviously not moved to Black Star's mother planet to fight for territory. According to the news, Floating Dragon would not move so easily. This represented absolute trust. They believed that they would not betray each other. Otherwise, they would not leave their backs to their allies. This kind of trust was extremely rare between galactic organizations. The relationship between the two organizations was too close, and it had already surpassed the level of ordinary allies. It was so close that the various organizations could not help but think of another possibility. Could it be that these two organizations had a chance to merge? Normally, a Beyond Grade A would not easily become the subordinate of another Beyond Grade A, so Beyond Grade A organizations were basically incompatible with each other. However, other than submission, cooperation, and alliance, there was another kind of relationship that was very common among ordinary creatures but rarely appeared between Beyond Grade, as the various organizations were not imagining things. According to the past deeds of Black Star and the Dragon Emperor, this was not without reason. Furthermore, not long ago, when Black Star went to meet the dynasty's ruler, he had shockingly brought along Ames. This had already surpassed the position of a neutral organization. This was a dangerous sign. If the two organizations really went beyond alliance and officially merged, this would mean that the Shattered Star Ring would have a suppressive, unofficial organization that would once again change the structure of the star field. Back then, many organizations had tried to break the relationship between the Black Star Corps and Floating Dragon, but they had failed and could only accept the truth. Now, many organizations were still unwilling to see the relationship between Floating Dragon and the Black Star Corps become closer. This involved their own interests, and many organizations were alarmed. Ignoring the thoughts of the large organizations in the Shattered Star Ring, many financial groups were excited. Blue Star's development prospects were not bad to begin with, and now that they had Floating Dragon, their potential had increased exponentially. The financial groups that had already cooperated with Floating Dragon decided to invest a large sum of money, and even more financial groups saw the business opportunity brought by Floating Dragon and sent people to Blue Star to seek cooperation. The people of Blue Star naturally did not have any objections and were pleasantly surprised. Flickering World, Geru, Star Cluster, streams of hyperdrive streaked across the universe and stopped outside the atmosphere of a purple-blue planet. This was the fleet Han Xiao was in. Although it was the main fleet, most of them had already been spread out to explore other unknown planets. Thus, the size of the fleet was not large. This purple-blue planet was the trading hub of this star zone in Han Xiao's memories, and it was the target that he was planning to explore personally. In his previous life, it was called Planet Pangaroos. Because there were no stargates in this unexplored region, the fleet flew for a period of time before arriving. We have arrived at the designated location. Army Commander, please give the next order. Aurora stood up straight and pretended to be serious as she reported to Han Xiao like a soldier. However, just as she finished speaking, she could not hold it in and started laughing. She only stopped laughing after being glared at by Hela. Engineering team, Throw a Stargate here first. Scout spaceships, circle this planet in the air, and map the terrain. Use detection equipment to detect life signals and underground resources. After the map is completed, send out a ground exploration team to conduct a thorough global search. Then, before Han Shao could finish, Philip suddenly appeared in his mind and interrupted him. Master, there is an urgent message from Blue Star, hum. The message was sent by Bennett in the quantum network, saying that they had successfully received Floating Dragon. He also mentioned the matter of the Avidan souls and attached the recording of the spaceship. In the recording, there was evidence of a group of Avidan souls plotting to attack Blue Star. Han Shao raised his brows. Cisco didn't provoke me, but there are people in his race who want to deal with me. Avidan souls. There seems to be such a small organization. Don't they hate ES God? They even took their anger out on me. I don't think it's considered taking their anger out on me. They want to blow up the entire planet with a suicide attack. Is there a need to have such a deep hatred? What a tiger. Also, where did their advanced psionic bombs come from? Han Shao was a little helpless. This was one of the side effects of occupying the evolution cube. He was already used to such extremists. Everyone's psychological endurance was different. Disasters and wars had always been the best way to catalyze extremist organizations. Logic was never the only way an intelligent creature judged things. Motives that came from emotions were stronger than logic, and hatred was one of the strongest motives. As long as it was not a race without desires, there would always be people who would be influenced by them. However, the revenge of this group of extremists was more of a hindrance to Psyker than a help. Han Shao shook his head. He did not intend to let things go and pretend that nothing had happened. Since Blue Star had a seat in the Civilization Conference, it was equivalent to receiving the treatment of a star system civilization and being protected by the peace treaty. Cisco's race had given him an opportunity to make things difficult for him. He replied with a message, which contained instructions to Bennett. Keep the evidence and contact the Amethyst Civilization in my name. Bring this matter to the Shattered Star Ring Civilization Conference and expose this to all civilizations. Leave the rest to me. Although this did not happen and could not do anything to Cisco, it was still possible to annoy him. A small group of his race had personally delivered the evidence to him, and in the end, the entire Star Pupil race had to take the blame. Would Cisco feel tired? Remember the mobile version of the website, M822 evidence to be used against him, page 1/1. Bookmark for easier reading. Chapter 817. After instructing Bennett, Han Shao exited the quantum network and returned to the real world to supervise the exploration of planet Pangurus. The engineering spaceship planted stargates in outer space, and the small reconnaissance spaceship entered the atmosphere of the planet. They circled the planet from high altitudes and detected the situation on the planet's surface. Very quickly, a report was sent back. The projection on the bridge turned into a map of planet Pangurus, and the details were quickly being perfected. Han Shao and a group of officers looked at the projection of the planet that was getting more and more detailed. Not long later, all the reconnaissance spaceships returned to the fleet and completed the first step of the exploration. The detailed parameters of the planet were recorded on the map, including the gravity level, air composition, climate, surface area, ratio of land to sea, vegetation coverage, and so on. Apart from that, the map also had areas of different colors that represented the resources that had been detected, as well as the areas where the signals of life forms gathered. Aurora read the report from the reconnaissance spaceship. This planet is rich in normal resources. Apart from that, there are many rare resources underground, such as the Black Gold Mine, Purple Silver Mine, Origin Crystal Mine, and more than 10 other rare materials. These are important raw materials for the technological systems of certain magic-type star system civilizations, and every 10,000 tons costs at least 60 anus. This is the price in the galactic market, and this planet should have more than 1 trillion tons of them. In a huge mountain range at the north and south poles of the planet, we have detected the rare mountain essence, which has about 800,000 tons of it. The price of every ton is about 6,000 anus. We have also discovered some soul ingots and origin substances that contain spiritual energy. There aren't many of them, and they are worth about 1,200,000,000 anus. Han Xiao listened for a while before nodding. Tell me the overall value of the planet. According to the results of the exploration, this planet is estimated to be worth about 18 billion anus. If we discover more rare resources underground, the value will increase even further. It's quite valuable. Han Xiao smiled. Based on the standards of resource-rich planets, this valuation was considered to be above average. The valuation was only one aspect. Different resource-rich planets produced different materials, and some rare materials even had bonus points. For example, mountain essence, soul ingots, and origin substances were all extremely rare. However, while the price was good, it would take hundreds of years to extract all the resources. In the universe, resource-rich planets were the private lands of the various civilizations, and they would not be sold like barren planets. Civilizations would slowly excavate resource planets, carry out sustainable development, and gradually seize profits. Even if it was an advanced civilization, as long as they did not encounter an emergency situation, they would not engage in destructive mining. Resource-rich planets were an important source of income for interstellar civilizations. Civilian miners could only go to the corners of barren, desolate planets to make a living. Civilizations did not care about the cost-effectiveness of desolate planets, so they would occasionally sell desolate planets to civilian organizations. Like the Black Star Corps, obtaining the mining rights of resource planets was already the limit of a normal private organization. Developing the flickering world was a great opportunity for development. After the dynasty's allies discovered a resource planet, although they had to inform the dynasty and let the dynasty take the lion's share, the exploration team would also be able to obtain a certain amount of mining rights and share a portion of the profits. Since the Black Star Corps had discovered planet Pangurus, they had the right to leave behind troops to mine. The number of planets in a star field was as vast as the sea, and the benefits were enormous. To an uncivilized force, this was equivalent to the right to mine countless resource planets. Furthermore, after discovering and reporting a certain number of resource planets, they would receive additional rewards from the Empire. However, the advantage of planet Pangurus was not limited to its resources. In the future, it would become one of the gateways to the Geru star cluster. With this added value, planet Pangurus was not an ordinary resource-rich planet, and it had a huge potential for appreciation. Seeing that Han Xiao did not say anything, Aurora continued. We have detected a large number of life signals on this planet, and most of them are wild beasts. We do not know how many species there are, but there is one intelligent species that has signs of civilization. As she spoke, a life-form projection appeared in front of everyone. This was the projection created by the detection spaceship after scanning the structure of the creature. This life form was about 3 to 4 meters tall and had a humanoid shape. It looked similar to the elves in the universe, but there were many small differences. Its body was slender and muscular, and it wore bee skin clothes. According to our observations, this intelligent species is the native civilization of this planet, Aurora said. They are in the form of a tribal civilization, and they have settlements all over the planet. They survive by hunting, and our detection spaceship has yet to come into contact with them. Han Xiao nodded his head. He had long known that planet Pangurus had a rather backward native civilization, and they called themselves the Children of the Forest. In truth, this title was extremely common in the universe, and there were at least 800 of them who called themselves the Children of the Forest. There were also the Children of the Rocks, Children of the Mountains, and Children of the Sea. In his previous life, people were used to calling the natives by the name of the planet. This race was also known as the Pangurus Giant Elves. Send out a ground exploration team to come into contact with them first, Han Xiao said. In the exploration of a star field, there is a sensitive issue in the universe, and that was how to deal with the natives. There are too many examples since ancient times. If a high-grade civilization wanted to mine a resource-rich planet, they would be treated as invaders and be resisted by the natives. Protecting the diversity of a universe had always been the rule of the high-grade civilizations. A universal civilization like the Red Empire would not slaughter the natives for the sake of mining resources. The commander-in-chief, Tarakov, had written the rule that when they met a native civilization, they had to communicate and educate them. Under such circumstances, the weaker the natives, the easier it would be to deal with them. Discovering a native civilization would also be the result of a mission. Planet Panguru's Qinglu Forest. This was a dense forest filled with giant ancient trees that were 50 to 60 meters tall. The leaves formed an ocean that swayed with the wind. The sunlight that shone through the gaps in the ocean of leaves was cut into spots of light that looked like golden leaves. These spots of light swayed with the swaying of the canopy and on the ground that was full of humus. A clear river passed through the forest, dividing it into two parts. Hundreds of 6 to 7 meter tall animal skin tents were located on the shallow bank of the river, lined up horizontally along the river. Strings of golden red dried fruits were hanging outside the tents, like decorations, simple and primitive. Smoke rose from the bonfires, like white snakes rising into the air. This was the Panguru's giant elf tribe, and it was filled with vitality. There were people picking fruits from the trees with baskets on their backs, and there were also people waving their branches to herd their livestock. There were also people carrying spears and wooden shields as they prepare to hunt. Hunters, there is not enough food in the tribe. You guys have to hunt more prey this time. At the entrance of a tribe, the chief led a few villagers to surround the hunters who were preparing to set off. Wait for us to return with a bountiful harvest. The old leader of the hunters laughed heartily. The chief sighed and said, "Sai, we were attacked by the other tribes half a year ago, and we suffered heavy casualties. Now, we can only rely on you old hunters to hunt. You guys are getting older and older, and I don't know what to do in the future." The leader of the hunters patted the shoulder of a young man beside him and praised, "Don't worry, we are training the young ones. Dookie is the fastest hunter, and he can already hunt with us. He might even be able to take over my position in the future." Dookie puffed out his chest with a proud look on his face. He had a muscular body, and he looked extremely valiant. What a formidable lad. We will be relying on you guys. A group of villagers surrounded the hunters and praised them with a respectful tone. Hearing the praises of the villagers, Dookie's face was filled with confidence, and he felt proud of being a hunter. Suddenly, his gaze passed through the crowd and caught a glimpse of a young man beside a bonfire in the distance. He was looking at him with an expression of yearning and envy. It was his good friend, Rizzo. Dookie raised his arm and showed off his muscles to Rizzo from afar. He blinked his eyes with delight, and the two of them laughed. "Let's go." The leader of the hunters called out and set off with his men. Seeing this, Dookie casually waved his hand at Rizzo as a form of farewell before hurriedly catching up with his men. The group of hunters entered the forest and disappeared from everyone's sight. The villagers gathered at the entrance of the village sighed and dispersed. Rizzo watched as his good friend left. He kept the smile on his face and silently fiddled with the food in the bonfire. Suddenly, he sighed. Hunters sigh. Hunters were responsible for hunting and fighting, and they were respected in the tribe. Basically, every young man in the tribe treated them as their goal, but Rizzo was an exception. He had no interest in hunting and fighting, and he had no talent in this area. Rizzo preferred to do things that were meaningless in the eyes of others, such as writing or thinking. However, this made many people in the tribe unhappy with him, thinking that he was a lazy coward who only wanted to be protected by others. However, he also wanted to be respected like a good friend. For this reason, he worked even harder to pick fruits and sew clothes. He did everything that he could. However, these tasks were done by the elders, children, and women, and it did not change the opinions of others. While Rizzo cared about the opinions of others, he did not want to go against his conscience and do something that he was not good at just to change the opinions of others. He hoped to use other methods to contribute to the tribe. However, in the tribe, it seemed that becoming a hunter was the only goal that a young man should have. Right at this moment, a huge gust of wind blew over. Hoo hoo hoo! Ripples appeared on the small river, and the smoke rising from the bonfire was dispersed. The fine sand and pebbles on the shoal were blown up by the wind, raising dust. The animal skin tents around them were shaking nonstop, making creaking sounds. What's going on? Rizzo raised his head in shock. His eyes widened, and he was dumbfounded. He had never seen such a thing before. A black rectangular box slowly descended from the sky and hovered above the tribe. A huge shadow covered the entire tribe. The expressions of the Panguru's giant elves in the tribe changed drastically. The god of the forest. What is that thing? Is it a monster that can fly? Quick, run! This incomprehensible scene caused many of them to panic. All of a sudden, a small hole appeared on the abdomen of the black monster, and a group of creatures covered in strange metallic clothes flew down and landed in the middle of the tribe. More than a dozen warriors who had stayed behind to guard the tribe roared and rushed up. They raised their wooden spears and fiercely stabbed these creatures that had descended from the sky. Kacha kacha! The wooden spears broke upon contact with the armor, and sawdust flew everywhere. After removing their helmets, half of them were warriors of the army, while the other half were players with IDs above their heads. Among them were people like Madblade and Hao Tion. Most of them were core members of the Sky Territory. This group of players had accepted the mission to come into contact with the natives without killing them. Madblade pressed on the galactic translator and spoke with a sincere tone. %*yen sigma. What are you saying? The Panguru's giant elves were confused. This was the first time they had come into contact with the Panguru's giant elves, and their language was not recorded in the database. Monster! Monster! Many women shrieked. Their faces were full of fear as they picked up rocks one after another and threw them at him hysterically. When the rocks hit the armor, they made thumping noises. Naturally, they were useless. The players looked at each other. They could not even communicate with each other. So how were they going to appease the agitated natives? They did not have any experience in such matters. The NPC captain with a cigarette in his mouth was very familiar with the situation. He raised the army standard blaster in his hand and fired a shot at the forest beside him. Shio! A blue laser shot out and pierced through dozens of trees, leaving behind a huge hole, following which a huge explosion occurred in the forest and a huge crater was formed. Trees fell one after another, creating a huge commotion. This scene frightened all the natives. They stared blankly at the result of this attack. Disbelief and fear appeared on their faces. They stopped attacking and trembled. Ooh! The captain spat out a mouthful of smoke and turned to the players beside him. Brother, did you see that? Just intimidation is enough to deal with the natives who cannot communicate with us. Just when the atmosphere was tense and all the Panguru's giant elves were afraid, Rizzo tried his best to remain calm. He observed these strange creatures that had appeared in an unbelievable manner, and a thought suddenly appeared in his mind. These creatures do not seem to be hostile. While he could not understand what they were saying, they seemed to be talking to each other. Did these creatures possess intelligence as well? That should be right. They want to communicate with us as well. Rizzo's expression changed, and he hesitated for a moment before taking a deep breath and walking out. His actions instantly attracted the attention of both sides, and everyone's gazes were focused on him. Rizzo swallowed a mouthful of saliva before shouting to his tribesmen, "Everyone, do not panic. We are not their match, but they do not seem to want to kill us. Do not anger them." As he said that, Rizzo walked in front of Frenzied Sword and looked down at this group of little people that only reached his waist. Suppressing his fear, he half knelt down so that they were at the same height. He pointed at his mouth and ears, hoping that this group of creatures that had descended from the sky would understand what he meant. Madblade understood what he meant and threw out a galactic language translator before making a few hand gestures to show how to put it on. Luo Su understood and hurriedly put it on. The translation device immediately read his thoughts. "Do you understand now?" Rizzo's eyes lit up, and he nodded. The captain chuckled and said, "He knows how to communicate with us. This fellow is rather smart. We will choose him as the representative of this tribe." Remember the mobile version of the website, M823 native. Page 1/1, bookmark for easier reading. Chapter 8:18. Due to the battleship in the sky and the intense explosion from the direction of the tribe, the hunters who had just left hurriedly returned. They looked at the mountain-like flying monsters in the sky in shock. The hunters hurriedly returned to the tribe. Although the people at home were still trembling in fear, there were no casualties. Seeing this, the hunters were slightly relieved. They dragged their clansmen to ask what had just happened. Dookie looked around and suddenly felt his heart sink. His good friend Rizzo was nowhere to be seen. He became anxious and asked someone. That group of people said a few words to Rizzo before taking him away. Before leaving, he told us not to be afraid and said that those people had no ill intentions. Where did they go? Dookie was furious. He did not care what Rizzo had said. He only knew that his good friend had been taken away by a group of dangerous monsters, and he could not sit by and do nothing. The villager pointed in a certain direction, and the army members did not return to the spaceship, but walked into the forest. Dookie did not say anything and charged in that direction with his weapon. The hunters beside him shouted for him to stop, but he ignored them and only wanted to save his good friend from the hands of the monsters. Seeing this, the leader of the hunters was afraid that Dookie would be in danger. He hurriedly gave some instructions and chased after Dookie. The giant elves ran quickly in the forest, and Dookie recognized the footprints on the ground. After running for a while, he finally caught up with a group of army members. The players were currently chopping down trees and clearing out an empty space. They were preparing to plant a portable base expansion pack there to form a small stronghold. According to the mission requirements and the army's instructions, the teams that came into contact with the natives had to build a base near each tribe to facilitate communication. There's a life signal. Madblade used his chains word to chop down an ancient tree. At the same time, the radar detected Dookie's presence, and so did the other army members. Dookie squatted in the treetops and did not know that he had been exposed. He observed these monsters dressed in metal and immediately saw Rizzo being surrounded. The next moment, Dookie jumped down from the sky and landed not far away from Rizzo. He rolled and stood up, kicking up a cloud of dirt. He then followed his countless hunter training and stabbed the lower body of a metal monster in front of him with a spear. The wooden spear pierced the metal-covered crotch, and, as expected, the wooden spear snapped. The army member who was attacked kicked out lightly, afraid that he would kill the native and cause the mission to fail. However, in Dookie's eyes, this kick was so fast that he could not react in time. He barely managed to raise his shield to block it, but an irresistible force assaulted him. Boom! The wooden shield exploded, turning into sawdust that fluttered in the air. Dookie was sent flying dozens of meters away and rolled a dozen times on the ground. His arm was in intense pain as it hung limply by his side. His chest felt stuffy, and he couldn't help but vomit out a large mouthful of gastric juice. He lay on the ground, unable to get up, and stared at the attacker with terrified eyes. "Don't kill him. He's my friend," Rizzo hurriedly cried out. He then looked at Dookie and asked in astonishment, "What are you doing here?" Cough, cough. "I'm here to save you." Dookie could barely stand up, and his voice was weak. He was just a normal human being, and the fact that he did not die after being kicked by a grade C warrior was because the other party had held back 99% of his strength. I don't need you to save me. They don't have any ill intentions, and they're all my friends. You should quickly leave." Rizzo was helpless and continued to plead with the army members. During this period of time, he had already obtained a rough understanding of the situation from the army members. While there were many terms that he did not understand, it did not hinder him from confirming that these people were not enemies. Hearing Rizzo call him back, Dookie raised his head and saw that Rizzo was conversing with these people. There was no danger at all, and he did not need anyone's help at all. After receiving a reply, Rizzo's face lit up with joy. "I've helped you plead. and they've decided to let you go. You should quickly return to the tribe. I'm fine here. Just wait for my news. Don't be rash anymore. Let me go, Dookie repeated and looked up at Rizzo with a complicated expression. It was as though he had just gotten to know this good friend of his who was not liked since young. A sense of loss rose in his heart, and Dookie clenched his trembling hands into fists. He squeezed the ground, and the soil squeezed out from between his fingers. At this moment, the leader of the hunters finally arrived. He looked at the army members warily, and when he saw Dookie lying on the ground, he was shocked. Rizzo hurriedly called out to him and explained. The leader of the hunters was skeptical, but he carried Dookie, who had lost the ability to move, and ran back. Rizzo sent the two of them off and heaved a sigh of relief. The ground troops landed one after another and came into contact with all the tribes. These battleships were like gods descending from the heavens in the eyes of the Panguru's giant elves. Their peaceful lives were broken, and all the natives felt fear and wariness toward the aliens that had descended from the heavens. According to the rules of exploration, the army would set up a stronghold near each tribe and choose one or a few representatives from each tribe to teach them how to use the translation device to convey their intentions. At the same time, Han Xiao did not let the others be idle. He sent out ground troops to land at the various resource points and set up mining bases. They used all sorts of digging equipment to open up the mines. Large patches of forest were removed and cold metal replaced them. Bases were built one after another on planet Pangarus. With a large amount of manpower and equipment, Han Xiao did not need to do anything personally. He only needed to command from the main ship in the planet's orbit. Your Excellency Black Star, you discovered a resource planet with rare resources? When the dynasty's commander, Seneco, received the news, he could not help but be overjoyed. At this moment, the majority of them were conducting a full exploration of Star Zone 1, and the various teams had already arrived at their respective planets. Most of them were ordinary, and they only contained ordinary resources that were commonly seen in the universe. Their value was not high, and there were very few planets that were worth more than 6 billion anus. Planet Pangarus was the most valuable planet that they had discovered in Star Zone 1. I have already completed the information of the planet in the database. There are also native civilizations here, and my men are in contact with them, Han Xiao said. Seneco pondered for a moment before saying, I see. You will be in charge of the exploration of that planet. I will send a small team over to help. According to the rules, as long as it was a planet discovered by the Black Star Corps, Han Xiao would be able to temporarily share the exploration rights. If it was a resource planet discovered by the dynasty's fleet, the dynasty's allies would have limited rights to interfere. Usually, the allies would only benefit the most from the exploration of the planet. Thus, Seneco's troops were both allies and competitors. After chatting for a while, Han Xiao hung up and opened the interface. Many notifications popped up from the Flickering World main storyline mission. He had obtained quite a number of exploration points from discovering a resource planet and discovering a native civilization. The players who followed him to planet Pangarus had obtained the most exploration points among all the players. As the exploration progressed, more and more points would be added to their account. On the forums, the players who explored the various planets showed off their points. And when they saw the points of the players who explored planet Pangarus, they could not help but feel envious. It's still the army commander who earns the most. Sigh, it's a pity. Many of the missions that follow Black Star were taken by the large guilds, and I didn't manage to snatch any of the remaining missions. Although the players had gone to explore different planets and were divided into teams that were far apart, they could communicate and share information across distances on the forum. It was very lively. Among the players that Han Xiao brought along, there were a large number of players from the club guilds. There were many professional players among them. Turning off the interface, Han Xiao looked at the light spots on the map that represented the army and suddenly asked, How's their contact with the natives? Did anyone resist? Aurora shook her head and said, There are more than 10,000 tribes on this planet, and the population of the Pangarus giant elves is around 10 million. Our warriors use deterrence to instill fear in them, so there are no casualties. There seems to have been some accidental deaths, but the number doesn't exceed 100. Han Xiao nodded. The natives of this planet were still in the early stages of their civilization, and their population was very small. It was still within the acceptable range that less than 100 people had died on the first contact. Get the ground troops to pacify those tribes and slowly educate them. This is only the first day, and this is a long process. Tell our people not to rush for quick results. Even if the natives resist, they will not cause us much damage. Try not to use violence against them. Although there was no resistance now, it did not mean that there would be no resistance in the future. The natives had not realized what they were going through, and there would be resistance one day. Thankfully, the natives were too weak, and their resistance was meaningless. This also protected them. Han Xiao knew that there were some native civilizations in the Renault star cluster that had barely reached the star system level. They were much harder to deal with than the Panguru's star cluster, and if the Bloodshed Land encountered them, they would be in trouble for quite some time. Educating a bunch of natives required too much time, and it would take at least a few decades to 100 years. Naturally, he would not waste so much time on a single planet. He was only laying down the foundation now, and when the dynasty's people arrived, the job of educating the natives would be handed over to the dynasty's professionals. He only needed to leave a few troops behind to mine before moving on to the next planet. The representatives of the various tribes returned to their tribes with the goodwill of the Black Star Corps, expressing that they had no intention of harming them. At the same time, they brought back food and seeds that were suitable for the climate of the planet. With the assurance of the representatives of the tribes, the Panguru's giant elves were no longer as fearful of the extraterrestrial visitors. Instead, they felt a strong sense of familiarity and curiosity. The stronghold beside every tribe had the function of a school, and it was open to the natives. Because the translator had picked up the language of the natives, they could communicate normally. Some of the braver natives took the initiative to go to the strongholds to learn. The strongholds taught them all sorts of knowledge, including agriculture and handicrafts. They also gave out free seeds and food, and some of the natives returned to their tribes to try growing crops. Through learning, the various tribes also learned about the origins of the extraterrestrial visitors and the existence of the Black Star Corps and the Red Empire. The members of the army taught the natives basic knowledge of astronomy and the history of the army. The natives could not imagine that there would be such a powerful organization in the heavens that could cross the universe so easily. All of this was beyond their understanding. In their eyes, the existence of the Black Star Corps was like a miracle. In the Greenflow Forest tribe, Russo's days became better. After becoming the representative of the tribe to communicate with the extraterrestrial visitors, Russo continued to learn and bring his knowledge back to the tribe. He was extremely talented in this aspect, and under his hard work, the tribe started to communicate with the Black Star Corps more frequently, learning new things and changing their way of life. Luo Su was shocked to find that those clansmen who had looked down on him before had all become respectful toward him. In the tribe, his position had suddenly surpassed that of the chief, becoming the most respected person. Every clansman was in awe of him. The culture of the natives had not been fully formed, and they did not have the concept of abandoning their traditions. They were all attracted by the new knowledge. In the past, the tribe members respected the hunters the most. Only when the hunters brought back food would the tribe be able to eat their fill. But now, the people who were respected the most were those who went to the stronghold to learn and bring back knowledge. They brought back food and seeds, allowing everyone to eat their fill more easily. They also brought back handicraft knowledge that made their clothes more comfortable and their tents warmer. They even brought back a free weapon called a crossbow from the stronghold. With such a weapon, hunting became much easier. The hunters were the warriors of the tribe, and they had the responsibility of protecting the tribe. However, in front of the members of the army, the hunters were completely helpless. The tribe members' trust in the hunters gradually decreased, and although the hunters were still respected, they were slowly being marginalized. Looking at Russo, who was surrounded by his tribe members, Dookie had a complicated feeling. In the past, this was an honor that belonged to him. Although he was good friends with Russo, he had a sense of superiority in his heart and felt that he was protecting Russo. But now, the positions of the two had been reversed. Russo, who had once been disliked by his clansmen, had become respected. On the other hand, a young hunter with high hopes had gradually been neglected, with no one paying any attention to him. Dookie felt the difference between them grow stronger and stronger, and he felt depressed. After dealing with the tribe members, Russo saw Dookie and hurriedly walked forward. "How are your injuries?" "I'm fine." Hearing Russo's concern, for some reason, Dookie felt irritated. He coldly replied before turning around and walking away as though they were strangers. Seeing Dookie being so cold, Russo was confused. In the past, Dookie was very cheerful, but after being injured by the members of the army, he became very quiet. It was as though Dookie was intentionally avoiding him and was unwilling to communicate with him. He did not understand why. On the other side, Dookie walked out of the tribe and ran in the forest. Feeling the wind blowing in his face, his mood gradually relaxed. After running for a long time, Dookie decided to go to his secret base. He had coincidentally found a cool spring water in the forest, and he would occasionally return to take a bath there to relax. Every time he finished bathing, he would feel refreshed. However, when he arrived at his destination, the scene there stunned him. The spring water had disappeared, and what replaced it was a bottomless pit. Around the pit were a few metal buildings, and the members of the army were operating strange machines to dig the soil. What are you doing?" Dookie was furious. He was extremely repulsed by these extraterrestrial visitors. Just as he was about to approach them with his weapon, his vision blurred, and an army member blocked his path. "The mining site is in front. It's not open to outsiders. Leave immediately." "Where's the spring water? Where's my spring water? What have you done?" Hearing this, Dookie was enraged. He pushed the army member in front of him and wanted to rush into the mining site. Bang! A huge force pushed Dookie away, and he fell a few times. He held his stomach with a pained expression. "I'm sorry. Please do not obstruct us from mining. If you have any needs, you can go to the stronghold near the tribe. This place is not open to outsiders." The army member shook his head. "Why can't I go over? This is clearly the place that I discovered." Dookie clenched his fists with a furious expression. At this moment, he saw the extraterrestrial visitors digging out a large pile of shiny crystals from the original location of the spring water. Seeing this, Dookie seemed to have understood. These people were draining the spring water to dig out these crystals. Looking up, he saw that the trees around him were all chopped down, and the forest was replaced by metal. He was a giant sprite that could run freely, but he was rejected by the extraterrestrial visitors. Thinking about what he had experienced in the past few days, an inexplicable sadness surged in his heart. However, he did not know where this feeling came from. In his confusion, Dookie seemed to have a feeling. This should have been something that belonged to them. For the first time, he had such a feeling. This forest, this land, this planet was their home. "Uncle, is it not very good for us to do this?" In the flagship in the sky, Aurora hesitated for a while before suddenly speaking. Han Xiao raised his eyebrows. "What are you trying to say?" At the side, Gila also looked over. Aurora pursed her lips and said softly, "What we're doing is actually invading the homeland of the natives. I know what you mean." Han Xiao waved his hands. "What we're doing is educating, bringing knowledge to the natives, and making them more civilized. It's different from just invading." But Aurora mustered up her courage. This planet was originally their homeland. These natives don't have the ability to defend their homeland, so they can only watch as their homeland is invaded by us. If we take their resources here, won't it be a bit bullying? They should be thankful that they don't have the ability to resist, or more people will die. But, Sai, you don't have to say any more. Han Xiao interrupted Aurora and said helplessly, "Do you think they have a choice? Actually, we can avoid the planets where the natives live and explore other unknown planets." Aurora blinked. Han Xiao shook his head, walked to the porthole, looked at the universe outside, and sighed. You're too idealistic. When this planet, no, when this star field was discovered by the three universal civilizations, the fate of all life in the star field changed, and they no longer have the right to develop freely. We can avoid the planets where the natives live, but when the Red Empire opens up the flickering world, do you think the other civilizations will let them go? They're destined to lose many things, and letting outsiders share their homeland and accept the teachings of the Red Empire is already a very good ending. The weak will not be able to get the best of both worlds. Aurora fell silent and felt conflicted. Because of her Esper ability, she was more sensitive and had a strong empathy for other life forms. She sympathized with the natives. Even if the Pangurus, giant elves, did not know the meaning behind it, she could not refute the law of the jungle in the universe. Hela had a calm expression. She was different from her younger sister. She had always believed that being weak was a sin and did not have much sympathy. Han Xiao paused for a moment before saying, "There's no need to think too much about it. Excavating their resources is indeed not a noble act, but you have to know that no race has the obligation to help another race develop. The civilization that the dynasty brought is because the natives' homeland is rich in resources. In essence, it's a transaction, although it's a transaction that the natives have no right to reject." In his previous life, after many years of development, Planet Pangurus had become a trading hub, and the natives were split into two factions. One faction accepted the civilization and became galactic residents, learning all sorts of knowledge and technology. They started to climb the technological tree, allowing the civilization to quickly leap past the primitive stage and develop rapidly. They had their own cities on planet Pangurus, and because it was connected to the galaxy, the natives could travel through the galaxy from time to time. The other faction rejected the civilization and chose to maintain their primitive way of life. This faction was hostile toward the galactic residents and the civilization branch. They tried to resist, but it was to no avail. In the end, they decided to not interact with the outside world and continued to live in the mountains with wild beasts as their companions. No one disturbed them. As a result, the Pangurus giant elves were split into two factions. However, every year, there would be people from the primitive faction who would leave their tribes and join the civilization branch. Compared to the exploration era, this is already not bad, Fu Ding said. Upon hearing that, Han Xiao nodded. The exploration of the flickering world was actually a microcosm of the exploration era. However, the difference was that the three universal civilizations now had enough strength to dominate the universe and suppress all who refused to submit. During the exploration era, when the various civilizations discovered each other, the first thing they thought of was to destroy each other. The flames of war were endless, and there were many casualties. Chapter 819. In the face of overwhelming strength, no matter what the Pangurus giant elves thought or did, they would not be able to stop the fleet from mining resources. The efficiency of the interstellar mining equipment was very pleasing. Every resource point in the world was continuously producing all kinds of raw materials. Batches of minerals filled up the warehouses, and the daily income was quite impressive. During the mining process, some of the exploration teams discovered even more resources underground, causing the value of the planet to rise once again. Han Xiao looked at the report and felt extremely comfortable. While the profits from mining the resource planets of the civilizations in the Shattered Star Ring were not small, they were still in the territory of others, and they did not have enough freedom. As for mining the resource planets in the flickering world that he discovered, he could do so with great fanfare. As long as it was not a destructive mining, the dynasty would not interfere. These rare materials could be sold to the dynasty or brought back to the Shattered Star Ring to be sold. Han Xiao temporarily stored them up and got the professionals to sell them at a high price. After the construction of the Stargate was completed, a small team from the dynasty arrived. After greeting Han Xiao, they also joined in the collection of resources. The professionals they brought took over the job of educating the natives. After a simple handover, Han Shao retrieved a portion of the manpower. The initial exploration of planet Pangurus was complete, and the only thing left was mining. He decided to stay on this planet for 2 days to allow the players to do some activities before heading out to explore the next planet. Now that all the players had explored the first planet, they had a certain understanding of the Flickering World mission. The players who encountered a resource planet were faced with a choice. They could choose to stay and mine the resources. The ordinary players would naturally reject this choice. How could they give up the entire forest for a single tree? However, the many first-rate guilds in China were the exact opposite. Most of the core members of the guild were following Han Zhao's main fleet, and they were not willing to give up on the rich resources of planet Pangurus. To the guilds, a bird in the hand was better than 10 in the bush. They needed the resource points to provide them with long-term income. The 4 largest guilds in China had many members, so they left behind a group of people to mine the resource points. Because the production of the large-scale mining equipment belonged to the army, these guilds bought a batch of worker bee armor from the army and gave them to the remaining members to mine on their own. This would be the long-term income of the guilds. The players had their own ways of generating income, and Han Shao would not stop them. This was just a small profit, and it was not enough for him to stop the players from displaying their own subjective initiative. The more these guilds were fed, the more they would acknowledge the army. The Russian and Australian club guilds from the Constellation Corridor had already developed a group of peripheral members during this period of time. They followed suit and left some people to stay in the resource points, hoping to get a share of the loot. Seeing this, the 4 great families decided to wait until the main force left before asking for the help of the other first-rate guilds to find trouble with these outsiders. This way, these foreign guilds would not be able to harvest resources in peace. As long as the main force left, the people left on this planet would be at their mercy. In Han Zhao's previous life, the various guilds had been destroying each other's resource points in the Flickering World in version 4.0. Now that the Russian and Australian guilds were in the territory of the Chinese guilds would not sit back and watch their competitors develop peacefully. Since Han Shao had allowed some players to cross over to other star fields in advance, the competition between guilds had started earlier than in his previous life. Planet Pangurus in a certain sea region. Raging winds and torrential rain filled the area. A mining base was located on the sea, and it did not move at all. A semicircular energy shield covered the entire base, and the waves smashed onto the shield, leaving behind white foam. At the edge of the base, warriors wearing underwater armor with detection equipment on their backs entered the water. A portion of them were players. There was a molten crystal vein below the base, and these people entered the water to investigate the situation in the sea region. Maple Moon had also accepted this mission. She wore underwater armor and swam underwater, reaching a depth of a few thousand meters very quickly. His field of vision was filled with dark blue seawater. Extending into the distance, the seawater turned pitch black, filled with the fear of the unknown. His ears were silent. Only the beeping of the radar, his own breathing, and the thumping of his heart in his chest. This silent and terrifying atmosphere caused Maple Moon to tremble, and she almost wanted to curl up into a ball. I should return. At most, I won't do this mission. Maple Moon was afraid. Although her combat strength had reached grade B, the attributes of her character would not give any bonuses to her mentality. She felt that she might have a slight phobia of the deep sea. Just as she was about to float up, the radar suddenly sounded. A large life form has been detected. The target is approaching. The seawater around her began to surge, and Maple Moon's body could not be controlled. She hurriedly activated the stabilizer, and a white light shot out from the armor. Only then did she stabilize her body. Before she could observe her surroundings, the radar showed that a dot of light was rushing toward her with the speed of a missile. Maple Moon turned around in panic. Suddenly, a huge monster appeared in her vision. It had countless web claws, and its head was like a plesiosaur's. It opened its bloody mouth at her. Her vision turned black, and she was swallowed. After the hunt, the monster slowed down. Just as it was about to enjoy its meal, its huge body suddenly twitched in pain. The next moment, a dazzling blue light exploded from the monster's body, blasting it into pieces. Boom! Purple blood and flesh splattered in the sea. Maple Moon's armor was covered in a sticky liquid that was a mixture of blood and gastric juices. Looking at this bloody scene, Maple Moon hurriedly turned on her green health mode. Only then did she feel that the scene was much more harmonious. She was just frightened and forgot to resist. When she came back to her senses, she unleashed the strength of a grade B mechanic and easily killed a normal beast. Maple Moon kept the bomb turrets beside her. She could not stand the deep-sea atmosphere and was about to float up. Suddenly, the radar notified her that she had detected an abnormal metal object in the monster's tattered body. What did I discover? Maple Moon's eyes flickered. As a storyline player, her curiosity had always been very strong. Her instincts told her that she might have discovered something hidden. After hesitating for half a second, she stopped floating up and searched the monster's body. She then released a magnetic force from her palm. Clang! A 1-meter-long metal object was sucked into her hand. You have discovered an unknown detector. You have received 6 exploration points. This is a hidden mission item. Maple Moon's eyes sparkled, and she threw the fear of the deep sea to the back of her mind. She then looked at the unknown detector in her hand with interest. She loved to dig up unknown plots. Without saying anything, she immediately returned to the base with the item. She did not even remove her armor and hurriedly started to appraise the detector. Her mechanic class ability met the requirements, and the results quickly popped up on her interface. Appraisal complete. The technology level is not low. Maple Moon was surprised. This had already reached the level of a star system civilization. Did this mean that planet Pangurus had already been discovered by a certain civilization? There is also a possibility that this beacon had already been damaged in space and lost its positioning ability. In the end, it was captured by the gravity of planet Pangurus and fell into the deep sea, becoming food for the sea creatures. If not, planet Pangurus would have already had visitors. Maple Moon was in a dilemma. This beacon was valuable information, and she would definitely be rewarded if she handed it over to the army. However, she could not help but feel curious. She wanted to repair this beacon and see what the special consequences were and what kind of people it would attract. After hesitating for a moment, Maple Moon gritted her teeth. Her curiosity won out. You have used intermediate repair on damaged location beacon. Appraising. Appraising passed. Your level, intelligence, class knowledge, and skill level have all met the prerequisites. Repair progress, 2%, 14%, 35%, repair complete. You have received barely repaired location beacon. Maple Moon was overjoyed. Without hesitation, she activated the beacon. Beep beep. The beacon lit up, and an invisible quantum positioning signal was sent to the receiving end of the unknown organization. You have triggered the hidden mission Beacon of Unknown Origin. Mission Introduction. You have discovered a rather high-tech location beacon on a native planet in the flickering world. You do not know who placed this beacon, but you have chosen to repair and activate it, sending out the location information. This might attract the attention of the unknown organization. Mission requirements. Come into contact with the unknown organization that placed the beacon. Mission reward. 300 EXP, 70 individual exploration points. 1. Bold Explorer Ability Fragment. Requires 2 fragments to be fused. Bold Explorer Special Ability. When exploring an unknown location or appraising an unknown item, you can use this ability to obtain a portion of information. Can be used repeatedly on the same target. Cooldown, 7 days. Every time you use it, you will receive the negative status, Reckless, and your LUK will be reduced by 60%. Lasts for 14 days. Remarks. As long as you have the courage, the universe is your home. This mission is linked to the Flickering World main storyline mission. You can report the situation to the faction you are in and receive the help of the NPC faction. Strongly recommended. Reward Ability Fragment. This kind of mission reward is really rare and I can even request the help of the faction. Does this mean that the consequences of activating the beacon are very serious? The moment she thought about handing it over, the image of the army commander appeared in her mind. You found the beacon of an advanced civilization on this planet? Looking at the beacon in Maple Moon's hands, Han Zhao's eyes were filled with doubt. Originally, he thought that Maple Moon was only there to learn a skill. He did not expect her to bring him a hidden item. Currently, only the dynasty was developing this area, so this beacon could only have come from an unknown native civilization in the flickering world. According to the technology involved, the one who placed it should be at least at the star system level. This beacon used conventional thrusters and gravitational flight technology. Even if it flew for a few hundred years, its speed would still be limited. Therefore, the civilization that placed the beacon should be in this star system. However, Han Xiao remembered that in his previous life, there was no native star system civilization in the southern border star system of the Gara star cluster. The exploration data of the Red Empire did not indicate that they had encountered a star system civilization there. In his previous life, he had also not heard of anything similar from the NPCs who explored during the version update. Could it be that the civilization that placed the beacon had already been destroyed and only the ruins were left? This possibility was not impossible. However, when Han Xiao took the beacon from Maple Moon's hands, a notification popped up on his interface. He had also triggered the same hidden mission, and the mission requirement implied that this unknown organization still existed. Han Xiaoxin's heart skipped a beat. In his previous life, the initial exploration of the flickering world took place during the version update, and the players only managed to recreate the exploration through various records and characters. Could this be a hidden storyline that even the dynasty did not discover in his previous life? Maple Moon did not know that Han Xiao could also accept the mission and was thinking about how to explain that she knew that the beacon was useful. At this moment, Han Xiao opened his mouth. Let me study this for a period of time. I might be able to discover some problems. Hearing that, Maple Moon thought that this was a mission item and did not reject it. After watching Maple Moon leave, Han Xiao then carefully studied the beacon in his hand. His eyes sparkled. I never thought that there would be such an unexpected discovery on planet Pangaroos. The ability of these players to find hidden missions is quite reliable. Han Xiao chuckled. The reward of this hidden mission was extremely tempting. Bold Explorer was an appraisal ability that reached the level of special foresight. In his previous life, very few players had this ability. While it was not useful for combat, it was a godly ability when it came to completing missions and discovering hidden storylines. He only knew that there was a chance of obtaining a skill fragment from a hidden mission. Other than that, there was no fixed way to obtain it. Although this skill had a lot of limitations, it was still useful to him. Just the strange data left behind by ES God was still a mystery, and Aesop could not predict anything. If he could obtain this skill, he might be able to find some clues. It's a pity that it's not a complete ability, only a fragment. Han Xiao felt a little regretful. Shaking his head, Han Xiao then entered the quantum network and studied the beacon, deciphering the other party's positioning data. This beacon used quantum link technology, which meant that he could use the ability of a virtual mechanic to track it. The mission requirement was to come into contact with this unknown organization. While it seemed like he only needed to wait for the opportunity, there was actually a deeper meaning behind it. The flickering world was not like the explored universe, and there was no order like a galactic society. The native civilizations here were still in a dark period and did not know of each other's existence. Thus, once the beacon was activated, it would mean a war for the person who placed it. Coming into contact with it would mean facing an attack from the person who placed it. Thus, rather than having the person who placed it find him, Han Xiao was more willing to take the initiative to send people over. After all, the requirement was to come into contact with the other party. After searching through the quantum link for a while, Han Xiao suddenly opened his eyes and opened his star map. After searching for a while, he pointed at a location that was a few star zones away from planet Pangaroos. It was also within this star system. Found you guys. Han Shao narrowed his eyes. He remembered that there was no native civilization at this location in his previous life. After thinking for a while, Han Shao snapped his fingers, and Psionic Prime, who was circling behind him, immediately fused and stood in front of him. "Master, I have a mission for you," Han Shao slowly said. "Bring some mechanical lives and a portion of your mechanical army along with you. Find the person who placed the beacon. If they attack, subdue them." "Understood, Master." Psionic Prime nodded, and the sound of metal rubbing against each other could be heard. He then split into many hovering guards and flew out of the room to form a team. Because it was a few star zones away, it would be too abrupt and a waste of time to go there, so Han Shao did not plan to do it personally. Now that he had his mechanical lives, and with the quantum infinite distance transmission channel, his mechanical soldiers would receive mechanical force bonuses even if they were not beside him. His mech legion already possessed the ability to go on expeditions, and they would still possess the strength of a beyond grade, a super, even if they were countless light years away. This was one of the reasons why beyond grade A mechanics were feared in the galaxy. Their range were the most terrifying of all the classes. Chapter 820. At the same time, the data sent by the positioning beacon was transmitted to a barren planet several star zones away through the quantum link. A huge disc-shaped battleship the size of a mountain was parked quietly in a crater. It had a diameter of more than 30 kilometers and was entirely iron gray in color. The material used was an ordinary alloy, which was considered a beginner space battleship material in the explored universe. This disc-shaped battleship had anti-gravity levitation and high-density nuclear thrusters. Its hyperdrive technology was very rudimentary. If there were galactic residents here, they would know that the technology level of this battleship was between that of a galactic civilization and a surface civilization. It was equivalent to the technology level of a planetary civilization that had just started colonizing outer space. The only thing that stood out was its quantum communication technology. A large number of cryogenic hibernation pods were distributed in the bottom cabin. Countless crew members were sleeping in them. Only a few people were awake, maintaining the life support function of the spaceship in the bridge cockpit. Dozens of creatures in simple combat suits were busy in front of the control panels. These creatures were quite short, had 6 arms, and brown skin. At this time, one of the control panels suddenly issued a notification. "Beep beep. Beacon 0278 has been activated. The positioning data of the beacon has been received." All the operators in the room hurriedly turned their heads and rushed to the control panel, whispering to each other. Then, a tall creature of another species pushed through the crowd and squeezed to the front of the control panel. "Get out of the way, let me see." "Ha ha! Do we discover a new planet?" This tall creature was obviously the leader. He was nearly 3 meters tall, and the short operators around him only reached his thighs. This person was wearing metal armor, which made clanking sounds as he walked. His appearance was lawless, even more ferocious than an orc. It did not conform to the aesthetic standards of most humanoid creatures. "Leader Kikiga, this beacon has been lost for a long time. I didn't expect it to be activated now. Our beacon has been discovered by an unknown intelligent creature. They have repaired the beacon." An operator was quite frightened. "Isn't that even better? We can even capture them as slaves and offer them to the Great Emperor. The Great Emperor loves new species the most." Kikiga laughed loudly. "Leader, it's not that simple. The target this time is different from the species we have invaded before. The other party can repair the beacon, which means that they have a technological level close to ours. There are not many people in the entire universe who can catch up to us. The target this time is not so easy to deal with. They took the initiative to repair the beacon, and it's very likely that they want to find us." "What?" "They dare to look for us." Hearing that, Kikiga's expression turned ferocious, and he said angrily, "It seems that they are a bunch of ignorant people who have never heard of the name of the Great Cosmos Core. You want to track us down? You're courting death." If Han Shao were here, he would not be unfamiliar with the name Great Cosmos Cores. This was a native organization of the flickering world, a wandering civilization that had lost their mother planet due to a disaster. They had been wandering around the center of the Geru star cluster, looking for all kinds of resources to sustain their lives. In the early days of their vagrancy, they explored the planets around them through beacons and gradually discovered some underdeveloped civilizations. Due to the lack of trust and communication, they destroyed all the civilizations they encountered and plundered a lot of resources and technology. Gradually, they got used to this way of development and turned from a vagrant civilization into a space pirate organization, making a living by plundering planets. As most of the native civilizations in the Geru star cluster were relatively weak and did not interact with each other, this organization was tyrannical in the central area of the star cluster, and no one stopped them. They had accumulated a lot of resources and manpower through plundering. There were no civilizations nearby that could resist them. This group of people thought that they were the overlords of this universe, so they changed their name and called themselves the Great Cosmos Cores. Just from this name alone, one could tell that this group of people was quite arrogant. Later on, the Great Cosmos Core started to explore even further. With their technology, they naturally could not figure out the overall distribution of the star cluster. They were completely clueless about the unknown regions and could only explore. Although they had occupied many planets as their territory, they had not fully explored the star system and lacked all kinds of basic facilities. It was like they had occupied a few planets and thought that they ruled an area. Compared to the civilizations in the explored universe, this group of people was completely clueless. This was an unexplored star field without order, which was why such a special organization had appeared. They had an area of influence that exceeded a star system civilization, but their strength was not even comparable to the most ordinary star system civilization. Due to the lack of opponents, they felt very good about themselves. Their strength was only limited to the native standards. In Han Zhao's words, this group of people was commonly known as frogs at the bottom of a well. In his previous life, when the dynasty explored the Geru star cluster, they only left a short amount of information about this organization. Han Zhao had laughed for a long time after reading it. Because in the dynasty's records, the deeds of this great cosmos cores could be compared to the Wan Shun heavenly kingdom in real life. However, when he discovered the beacon, the title of hidden mission was quite suspicious, and Han Zhao thought that this was a mysterious civilization in the local star system. The Great Cosmos Core was located in the middle of the Geru star cluster. In the dynasty's records, there was no mention of the Great Cosmos Core appearing in the southern border star system of the Geru star cluster. Furthermore, the dynasty only had a short record of the Great Cosmos Core because this local organization was simply too weak to the dynasty. They had committed the common mistake of the natives, which was arrogance. This small episode was not worth recording to the dynasty. In his previous life, the dynasty's exploration was something that happened during the version update, and the players did not experience it personally. After officially entering the flickering world, the Great Cosmos Core had long been dead. Han Zhao could only understand it through the dynasty's records and did not have a deep impression of it. Therefore, he did not think in that direction at first and did not know that the target of the mission was this organization. However, even if he knew, it would not make much of a difference to him. I think it's better to report this to the Emperor. With just a few of us, I'm afraid it's not enough. What did you say? Kikigo was easily angered. He slammed his palm on the table. Leader, don't be angry. The Emperor put you in charge of this area. If we act on our own, the Emperor will be angry. Hearing that the Emperor might be angry, Kikiga shivered and said hesitantly, Then, let's report this to the Emperor. Everyone hastily contacted the Emperor and focused. Very soon, the projection of a person appeared on the screen. The person in the image was of a humanoid race. His entire body was wrapped in dark purple mechanical armor, and only his head was exposed. He had messy black hair and pale skin. The lower half of his face was covered by a metal mask, so his appearance could not be seen. His eyes were filled with indifference. He was wearing a bright red cape that covered half of his shoulders. Thick tentacles extended from his back. These tentacles were muscular and similarly covered in a certain amount of armor. They were like many mechanical tails that clustered around this person. He was sitting on a steel throne on a battleship. Behind him was a metal wall with the insignia of the Great Cosmos Core engraved on it. The skulls of different beasts were hung on it like trophies or collectibles. This person was the leader of the Great Cosmos Core, Adamo. Seeing this person, Kikiga hurriedly stood up. "You better have a reason to disturb me." Adamo raised his eyelids. His tone was neither salty nor light, but it was filled with coldness. Kikiga shuddered. He had become one of the leaders because of his outstanding combat ability. Although he had a bad temper, he was afraid of Adamo from the bottom of his heart. Under the constant reminders of the operators, he stuttered and reported what had just happened and carefully waited for a reply. "So, you were discovered by a group of unknown organizations with advanced technology?" "Yes, what should we do?" "Invade their planet, plunder their technology, snatch their resources, destroy them, and capture them." Adamo's tone did not change. "Do you still need me to teach you all these?" Understood." Kikiga hurriedly nodded. After hanging up, Kikiga heaved a sigh of relief and glared at the operator beside him. "Did you hear that? The Emperor wants us to destroy the enemy. Wake up all the fellows that are sleeping. We have a war to fight." 2 days passed in the blink of an eye, and Han Zhao's main fleet left planet Pangarus. He only left behind a certain number of mining troops. The next planet that Han Zhao planned to personally explore was a resource-rich planet in the first star zone of the border star system. In his memory, the famous planets were scattered all over the place. Compared to the size of the entire star cluster, the first star zone was still a little smaller. Other than planet Pangarus, he had some impression of more than 10 planets in this star zone, and they were all places that he had personally visited in the past. A portion of them were resource-rich planets. Back then, he had mainly formed a team to snatch the resources from the guilds. The rest were functional planets, such as Stargate stations and supply stations. The exploration team of the Black Star Corps and Seneco's exploration team split up. Based on their current efficiency, it would take them around 17 to 18 days to explore all the planets in the first star zone. As such, it would take them around half a year to explore the entire star system. The main reason was that they had to spend a lot of time on the road. After all, not every planet had natives, and ordinary planets could be explored very quickly. As for the Special Task Force, because they did not stop during the journey, they would only need 4 months to cross more than 10 star systems and establish long-distance stargates. During this period of time, Han Zhao felt that he should be able to explore all the planets in the star system that he had an impression of. On the other side, a few battleships left the fleet and carried the mechanical troops sent by Han Zhao. They followed the reverse positioning of the beacon and headed toward where Kikiga and the others were. Inside the spaceship, rows of mechanical soldiers quietly lined up. Under Sparta's remote control, they were on standby and did not move at all. In the cabin, however, there was a group of fellows that did not fit in with the lifeless mechanical army. They were the mechanical lives under Han Zhao that had activated their tinder. "Everyone, this is the first time Master has sent us out to fight. We definitely cannot disappoint Master." In the spacious room, dozens of mechanical lives were either sitting or standing, looking at Psionic Prime, who was speaking with a serious expression. As soon as he said that, a silver mechanical life that was leaning on the sofa spoke in an impatient tone. "Humph, we're all the first generation of Master's children. You were just born the earliest, and you think you're a leader?" Han Zhao had personally created thousands of first-generation mechanical lives, and Psionic Prime was the leader. However, some mechanical lives were not convinced. The mechanical lives that had awakened free thinking also had emotional modules. Because their bodies were different, they would basically have a body that was convenient for them to move around through nanotransformations. According to the bloodline relationship of life forms, Silver Flash, "I'm your big brother," Psionic Prime said. This mechanical life form that spoke was called Silver Flash. He was usually jealous of Psionic Prime for being able to accompany Han Zhao all the time. Psionic Prime was only a hovering fissioner, and Master clearly liked his thick, long, and fierce planet destroyer the most. Let's fight! Let's fight! Whoever wins gets to be the big brother. A reddish-black mechanical life form that was clearly shorter than the others jumped up and down. Its main body was a dark energy floating cannon called Crimson Flame. Stop messing around. Psionic Prime waved his hands. I'm messing around. Silver Flash saw the opportunity and suddenly pounced. His mechanical but crushed the sofa as he charged towards Psionic Prime. Psionic Prime immediately split from his human form into many hovering guards, allowing Silver Flash to pass through. Huh! Silver Flash placed his arms on the ground, spun his body, and kicked towards Psionic Prime's hovering guard doppelganger. His main body was a planet destroyer, so he did not dare to fire casually on the ship. Two hovering guards suddenly combined and turned into a hand, grabbing Silver Flash's leg. Sparks flew as the metal clashed. Psionic Prime then returned to his human form and threw Silver Flash over his shoulder. Bang! The heavy mechanical body smashed a crater into the metal floor with a bang. Do you still want to play? Psionic Prime grabbed Silver Flash's leg and did not let go. His palm released a nanoparticle restraining field, preventing Silver Flash from nanotransforming and retracting his leg. Silver Flash fell to the ground. One of his legs was grabbed, and the other leg kept kicking towards Psionic Prime. Psionic Prime dodged all of his attacks like children fighting. The two mechanical lives fought, and the room was instantly in a mess. The surrounding mechanical lives quickly moved away and cleared the space. Usually, in Han Zhao's secondary space military camp, mechanical lives would spar with each other every day. All the mechanical lives were used to it. Did you not apply the oil? Harder. The Scarlet Fire Regiment shouted from the side, wishing for the world to be in chaos. One of the Oathkeepers could not stand it anymore and kicked it away like a ball. Don't sink the spaceship. If you want to fight, go to the combat room. A Ranger Mechanical Life yelled. At this time, all the movements of the mechanical lives froze, and Sparta's cold voice sounded. Master finally gave you guys a mission, and you guys are messing around? All of you better reflect on yourselves. Mechanical lives had free will, but in the underlying logic, Han Zhao's artificial intelligence had a higher priority, second only to Han Zhao's authority. Normally, Han Zhao would not allow the artificial intelligence to easily take over the control and let the mechanical lives move freely. That way, the growth effect will be better. However, Sparta did not want these mechanical lives to continue messing around. In an instant, he took away the control of these mechanical lives and controlled them to return to the cabin. However, although these mechanical lives could not control their bodies, their minds were still active, and they cursed at each other through the network. Silver Flash. If it was an open space, you would have turned into scrap metal already. Psionic Prime, Ranger, it's all your fault. We can't even move. Oathkeeper, Silver Flash. After completing the mission, I'll dismantle you and send you back to Master to be reconstructed. Silver Flash. You think I'm afraid of you? Let me blast you with my cannon if you dare. Let's see if you have the chance to be reconstructed. These mechanical lives could not move their bodies, but their mouths could speak. In short, they were punished to stand. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.